Okay, good evening and welcome to the regular meeting of the Halton District School Board for Wednesday, October the 7th, 2020. We are conducting these meetings in a rotating blended model, as you will see by backgrounds. Some of us are at the JWS Singleton Center, and that would be Trustees Shuttleworth, Garrett, Rocha, and myself, as well as Director Miller. We have had some technical difficulties, and we are abiding by public health guidelines to maintain social distancing. So that is why we're conducting ourselves in this manner. So if you have any questions about the content of our meeting this evening, please reach out to your local trustee or myself after the meeting. As per all of our board meetings, this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on the hdsb.ca website. As these virtual meetings are long and are hyper-focused, I will be calling at least one 5-minute recess during the course of this meeting this evening. So on Friday, we had a day of recognitions for custodial staff, and Monday was World Teacher Day. We want to celebrate these two groups as well as all of our education workers and school staff who keep our board moving forward through these very trying times. At this time, I will take roll call. Please, trustees, answer as I call your name in alphabetical order. We already know that Trustee Widia Lankara sends her regrets this evening. So I'll start with Trustee Amos.
Good evening, everyone.
Trustee Collard. Okay, we'll come back to Trustee.
Yes, I'm here. Sorry, I have to use two devices. I'm sorry.
No problem. Vice Chair Al Harrison.
Here.
Trustee Garrett.
Present, and thank you.
Trustee Gray.
Present, thank you.
Trustee Oliver.
Good evening, everyone.
Trustee Reynolds.
I am here, thank you.
Trustee Rocha.
Good evening.
Trustee Shuttleworth.
Nice to see everyone tonight.
And Trustee Taylor.
Present.
Excellent. Trustee Daniele, are you here? No, Trustee Daniele has said that she may be late because she has an important appointment that could benefit the students of the board, actually, I believe. Director Miller, could you please note the senior staff that are here and any other staff that are joining us in this meeting?
I will. All superintendents are here this evening except Superintendent Hutton-Gibbons. In addition, we have General Manager, but we will be making an announcement about him in the Director's Report later on, and he will no longer be the General Manager. He'll be somebody else. And we have Dr. Jewel Amoa, our Human Rights and Equity Advisor, and someone I have not recognized before these meetings. I do want to welcome and acknowledge the work of Kevin Raposo, our technical person who puts all this together for us. So he's here this evening as well. I'm not sure if General Manager Thibault is here. Maybe he's here. Well, and General Manager Thibault.
Okay, thank you, Director Miller. This evening, Trustee Oliver will be honoring the land. Go right ahead.
Good evening. Halton, as we know it today, is rich in history and modern traditions of many First Nations and the Métis. From the Anishinaabe to the Arawandaren, the Haudenosaunee, and the Métis, these lands surrounding the Great Lakes are steeped in Indigenous history. As we gather today on these treaty lands, we have the responsibility to honor and respect the four directions: land, waters, plants, animals, ancestors that walked before us, and all the wonderful elements of creation that exist. We would like to acknowledge and thank the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation for sharing their traditional territory with us.
Thank you, Trustee Oliver. Are there any possible conflict of interest this evening? If so, please put up your hand on the speakers list. Seeing none. So next we are up to the agenda. Please note that we are adjusting we had an amended agenda come out this afternoon as Dr. McGanny could not make it this evening. And we have added in a presentation, a staff presentation this evening instead, talking about the complexities of switching learning modes. And we are also adding 1.4, which is ratification of private session action items. That one's usually there. I think it was a little oversight there. So Trustee Collard, would you like to move a motion to approve the amended agenda as distributed this afternoon?
Yes, I would, please.
Thank you. Trustee Garretts, would you like to second this motion?
Yes, I would. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Just looking to the speakers list. Okay, seeing none, if you could please go to your voting form. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. So it's been a while, but it's one of my favorite nights again. We get to honor people with Inspire Awards. So a few years ago, the trustees of the Halton District School Board recognized that there were people within and outside of the organization who go above and beyond to support student achievement and well-being. Trustees wanted to honor the work of these people and created the HDSB Inspire Awards. Nominations are accepted all year round, including the summer, and award presentations happen monthly during the school year. Recipients choose usually recipients choose where they would like to receive their award, but since we are in a pandemic situation, we present these awards during our virtual meetings. So tonight, we will be honoring these exceptional individuals remotely. So everyone in the Halton District School Board community can nominate or be nominated families, neighbors, related organizations, staff, students, and school volunteers. The Inspire Award is given to an individual or group that is formally or informally associated with the Halton District School Board, who support our students and their achievements through exemplary caring, initiative, innovation, and creativity. Tonight we have 9 recipients to honor. 8 were nominations that came in June and 1 came in August. The local trustee will be providing the information about each nominee or nominated group. So I'm going to ask Vice Chair Al Harrison to please share the presentation of the recipients. So before each of the trustees talk about the information that helped that recipient receive their Inspire Award, I will name the recipient, their location, and the trustee that's about to present. Okay, so going to the first one is Christopher Hall. He's at Georgetown District. This will be presented by Trustee Gray.
Thank you, through the chair. Everyone, Christopher Hall is a teacher at the Georgetown District High School. He has gone above and beyond to support his students. He has taken extra care and effort to help students and their families navigate a different school process since the pandemic. Chris has provided technological support and helped provide assistance to families with many other important needs to support student learning and well-being at home and in the classroom. He connects with GDHS families frequently to ensure students have what they need to be successful. Christopher is a dedicated, hardworking, and he's extremely admired by his students and their respective families. Congratulations, Christopher Hall.
Congratulations, and thank you for all that you do for our students. The next recipient is Richard Holt from Gary Allen High School, and this is presented by Trustee Shuttleworth.
Thank you. Through the chair. Richard is a guidance, adult, and continuing education secretary at Gary Allen High School. Richard has done a phenomenal job helping students and staff at Gary Allen High School adjust to learning changes this year. Responding to the changes to Gary Allen's programming early in the school year, Richard has been instrumental in reorganizing and updating the Gary Allen High School website to provide a student-friendly experience. Richard's work is very much valued. His colleagues are grateful for his expertise in providing clarity to new processes on the school website and his quick work ethic. Now, although he does not always enjoy being the center of attention, everything that has been pivoted on the website at Gary Allen was Richard's doing. The time frame under which he accomplished it, all the while starting the summer school process, was quite remarkable. He's a gem, and Gary Allen is lucky to have him. Congratulations, Richard.
Congratulations, Richard. Next is Captain R. Wilson Public School Spirit Team, and this will be presented by Trustee Oliver.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, it is my pleasure tonight to present the Inspire Award to the Captain R. Wilson School Spirit Team. This is a dynamic team of educators at the school, which includes Colette Peaker, the Vice Principal, Janet Plow, Child and Youth Counselor, and teachers Melanie Klomp, Lynn Gagnon, Belinda Cottrell, and Holly Moniz. These educators provided an exemplary contribution to the well-being and belonging of Captain R. Wilson staff, students, and community, while students participated in distance learning in the spring. This group of educators didn't let anything get in the way of meeting the school's well-being and belonging goals as set out in the school improvement plan for student achievement. The Spirit Team provided caring, innovation, and creativity, and supported staff with the use of a variety of technological and digital citizenship tools to provide effective online learning and keep the school community connected. The Spirit Team has helped the Captain R. Wilson learning community stay bonded. Congratulations.
Excellent. Thank you very much. The next recipient is Katie Dunk from Brant Hills Public School, and since that is one of my schools, I will be speaking. So Katie Dunk is a volunteer for the Breakfast Club at Brant Hills Public School. She organizes the morning volunteers and completes the shopping for the breakfast morning carts. Katie picks up weekly community donations and organizes food for Brant Hills and 2 other schools in the community. Since March, Katie has continued to support students and families by starting a Facebook group and collecting donations from families and shops in the community and delivering to families in need. Katie is a caring person who is an inspiration to the entire community. Everyone at Brant Hills, including staff, parents, and students, appreciate her kindness. Thank you so much, Katie. The next recipient is Jennifer Lee. She is at Charles R. Baudouin Public School. Jennifer Lee is a teacher at Charles R. Baudouin Public School. Jennifer demonstrates an absolute passion for learning and fun with her students. Her creativity enabled her to provide innovative, engaging, dynamic, and fun distance learning content for her students during the Ontario school closure. Diligent with communication with students and parents, Jennifer regularly provides an opportunity for students to create goals for themselves with a focus on self-growth and working at one's own pace. She is joyful and always has a smile to share. Congratulations, Jennifer. The next recipient is Lauren Thompson at James W. Hill Public School, and this will be presented by Trustee Tanya Rocha.
Lauren Thompson is a teacher at Hill Public School. Lauren's dedication and passion has been evident the moment students entered her classroom on their first day of the 2019-2020 school year. In the spring, Lauren did an amazing job transitioning students to distance learning. The structure and format she created engaged her students and was helpful for families. The effort Laura puts into every assignment and the attention she takes to provide quality feedback to each student is above and beyond expectations. It is evident Lauren truly cares for her students. Thank you, Lauren.
Excellent. The next recipient is Erica Fellerstag, Bruce Trail Public School, and this will, if Trustee Daniele is available, she will be presenting. Nope. So Trustee Heather Garrett has offered to step in on her behalf. Go ahead, Trustee Garrett.
Good evening. Thank you. It is my honor on behalf of Trustee Donna Daniele to present an Inspire Award to Erica Fellner-Stagg. She is a kindergarten teacher with the HDSB. The Inspire Award is for Erica's previous role as an ESL teacher, English Second Language teacher, at Bruce Trail Public School. Erica goes above and beyond for her students and the teachers at the school. As an ESL teacher, Erica built relationships with each of her students, focusing on creating a strong sense of community and providing an equitable learning environment. She ran the school's Food for Thought program, holding many lunch meet and greets for members who were new to the Bruce Trail community. She learned with the coat drive for the Halton District School Board Welcome Center and assisted new families in getting access to bicycles to make their summers more enjoyable. Erica's dedication and contribution to students and families will live on forever at Bruce Trail. Way to go, Erica.
Excellent. The next recipient is Cindy Casentino, and she's with Secondary School Programs Department at the New Street Education Center. And as chair, that falls under my area. So Cindy has been a dedicated and inspirational educator for 30 years, more than a decade of which have been with the HDSB. Throughout her career, Cindy has worked as a classroom teacher, department head, education officer with the Ministry of Education, and an instructional program leader. She has inspired thousands of students and teachers and has redefined what it means to be an innovator in curriculum delivery and leadership. Cindy has written and reviewed Ontario curriculum, developed a grade 9 integrated math and science program, developed and reviewed contextualized learning activities for the Ministry of Education, and was the driving force behind bringing integrative thinking, I think, to science teachers in Halton. Cindy retired in June, leaving a legacy of teachers and leaders who, like her, continue to seize opportunities to innovate, push boundaries, and make our education system the best it can be for all students. Her guidance, passion, and mentorship will continue through those she has impacted. Congratulations, and thank you so much, Cindy. The next recipient is Larissa Benedetti Lucas at Chris Hadfield Public School. And I believe Trustee Garrett will be saying this one as well.
Thank you again. And again, on behalf of Trustee Donna Daniele, it's my honor to present the Inspire Award to Larissa Benedetti Lucas, who is a teacher at Chris Hadfield Public School. And Larissa is supportive of all her students and makes sure to understand each of their individual learning needs. She takes the time to seek out individual additional resources and materials that families can use at home to supplement their learning. During the school closure period, Larissa listened to feedback from families and through phone and video calls and adjusted assignments to help students better work on their own and feel a sense of accomplishment. Larissa did a fantastic job adjusting to the online learning, making changes where necessary, and always making herself available to answer parent and student questions. The care and effort that Larissa brings to her work is an inspiration to her colleagues and is valued by her students and their families. Thank you again, Larissa.
Thank you and congratulations. And congratulations to all Inspire Award recipients for your outstanding support for the Halton District School Board, student achievement, and well-being. For everyone watching this evening, please do continue to nominate people or organizations throughout the school year who support our students and their achievements through exemplary caring, initiative, innovation, and creativity. The nomination form is available at hd.ca. So we have no delegations this evening, but as per our amended agenda, we do have one presentation, Switching Learning Models, the Complexities of Virtual and Face-to-Face Learning During COVID-19. And this is presented by Director Miller, Superintendent Podreberic, and Superintendent Blackwell. Go right ahead.
I will introduce it, and then I will turn it over to Superintendent Blackwell and Superintendent Podreberic. But I want to make a few opening remarks around the presentation. As the trustees are certainly aware, but sometimes the public is not aware, there is a great challenge around switching from virtual to face-to-face and vice versa, switching from face-to-face to virtual. And we have had parents, we have set times aside when that can be done. There's some reasons why we have done that. If we were to just do it all the time or do it at parent request, we would not possibly be able to organize our schools, neither the virtual or face-to-face, both at elementary and secondary panels. We would have a challenge in moving students from out of a class and into another class. So from an organizational point of view and a system point of view, it is extremely complex, as you'll see in the presentation tonight, to organize our schools. We have to match teachers, classrooms with students. And at secondary, we have to match teachers' specialty subjects, classrooms, with students who have chosen those specialty subjects. So therefore, it's a massive three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle that's not easily put together. However, there's another reason that we don't want to constantly be changing students from one system to another, is because we do not believe that it's conducive to learning. We believe that the students, and in many cases, those with special needs in particular, they get used to their teacher, they get used to their classmates, and therefore the learning takes place. If they are moving constantly, then we are moving teachers constantly. We are splitting up cohorts constantly. We do not think that this is good for learning, and it's certainly not what the guidance of public health would be about changing cohorts. So therefore, we've asked to do this presentation for the board tonight for you to see the complexity. And both superintendents will talk about the educational aspects of why we do what we do as well, because our primary goal here is to support our students, both make them feel safe and belong, but also to advance their education and help them to be successful. So with that, I will turn it over to, it looks as though Superintendent Podreberic is going first. So I will turn it over to him. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Miller. Through the chair to all trustees, Superintendent Blackwell and I are happy to go into a little bit more detail than Director Miller just went through with you, but just to outline it and then use some visuals to highlight what we're talking about in terms of just changing the delivery models. I'm going to shake it up and start with slide one. Okay, there we go. So I'll start. I'm going to speak to the elementary processes, and then Superintendent Blackwell will turn to the secondary pieces, and then we'll absolutely take any questions you may have at the end. So what you're seeing here is just the standard yearly elementary staffing process that we would go through. To organize our schools and our programs, we start generally in March. We look at overall enrollments. We create our programs such as French immersion, special education classrooms. We look at enrollments and our regulations around staffing numbers. We start meeting all of those early. Then we go to the class building pieces, and we use that know the learner you'll see on that slide, just because we look at so many factors when building class lists. I know trustees probably become experts on class lists every September when we hear of people not happy with them sometimes, but really schools take the best interest of kids at heart when they're building those. It can take weeks for schools to put together class lists, which they feel are balanced and set kids up for a successful year. Those are academic pieces, social emotional pieces. and even more factors. So that happens next. And we're moving through April and May. We look at program compositions. Then we start timetabling, supervision schedules, and creating learning spaces. In other words, allocating rooms around the school to best optimize things, looking at portable needs and all of those pieces. Communication and transitions for transportation, supporting special students with special needs in terms of any transitions there, making sure information is shared in the best possible way. Medical plans of care are now starting towards the end of the year. And then we do look at an annually around reorganization, sometimes around third or fourth week in September, when we have to do adjustments. And reorganizations are typically limited because generally our planning department is so spot on with the numbers that we have very few reorganizations, but they are inevitable. And it always puts us on edge when we have to do them because they're very disruptive. So that would be a typical process, March to September. You can go to the next slide. You can see this year, there's no way around that process. I just like to highlight that. So that happens every year, and skipping those steps just won't make it work. So what we've had to do is incredibly crunch or truncate each of those into a smaller incremental time, shrink the time and really compress things this year. So we've already done it in August. We have, looking ahead to October, we'll start for a November implementation. And I know you've heard that date coming up, November 30th. And then we're looking to do it again, January for a February implementation. And these timelines are aligning with our reporting, assessment, and obligation and reporting timelines. We haven't necessarily pulled them out of thin air. So November is around the progress report, and then our term 1 reports are coming up in February. So those are the elementary dates. So it's not like we're refusing or not wanting to, but we are certainly trying to limit the number of times that we have to reorganize. To add a new layer of complexity on here as well, is we're really doing this for 2 different systems. It's almost like we're a virtual system now and a face-to-face system. And one always impacts the other. There's a tug between the 2 systems. And so that's added a whole new layer of complexity for us. So if you go to the next slide. Oh, and I should mention too, actually, could you go back? Thank you. We have the March to September one. So come this March, we'll be starting, we're hoping to get to the point where we can start our annual process for the next school year, next September. So we'll be adding that layer in just after our February reorg. So you can see staffing is really, normally we'd be finished at the end of September, pick it up again in March for the next year. But really this year, even with select dates, we always are going to have a foot in the staffing organization doorway, so to speak. And that has its own stresses. With this, if you can zip forward, I'll pick up some of the other. Thank you. You can see here, we have their virtual schools, and then we have just some modeling for you. And I'll talk to a number of the transition points. Because as I said, we are seeking some balance in this. We're trying to get it just right. We realize, we have to honor parent choice. We know we have to do that through the process. But as Director Miller also said at the outset, we have to create some sort of stability and stable learning climate for our kids and our staff in the system as well. Principals need to lead their schools. They just can't be taken, and likewise with teachers, subsumed in constant change of kids coming in and out, and every move has a counter move to it. So if you look at these arrows in and out might just reflect for 5 different schools what the ins and outs can look like. The numbers can be even bigger than this. These are just random to give you an idea. But to add somewhere else, we need to take from somewhere. That's just our budgetary reality. When we add a teacher to a virtual school, it has to come from the face-to-face school. What this does is it topsy-turvies the balance in our classrooms. It can collapse our staffing assignments in a school. It means that kids who had no desire to move from their teacher and their classroom teacher will be moving because we have removed their teacher from a face-to-face school, for example, and are having to move a teacher there. There are rules governing that and timelines governing that and staffing processes we have to honor. So these still, even though we try to compress and truncate whenever we can, especially this year, this still takes us time. And it's still a massive project to manage for 65,000 kids in our regular schools and now our virtual schools. So if you look at it all, we have surplusing processes and there's so many moving pieces here that we can do it, but we only want to do it so many times in the year. We talked about assessment periods for kids and why those dates are pegged there. It's very tricky when we are moving kids to a virtual. They have a whole new teacher, a whole new classroom of kids. It can interrupt their curricular connections, their curricular coherence. Teachers do not present learning materials and learning lesson sequence at the same time. So it can cause a disruption to that for kids. It will cause a disruption for kids from moving. Hence our desire to limit things and also get us from constant reorganization into something a little more coherent. Hence our sticking to these select times. There's also the surveying process of parents, which takes time. It's challenging, asking 66,000, the parents of 66,000 kids to answer a survey and then track them down is very difficult. And these were processes in August that we had to continually message. And I think we ended up making about 9,000 phone calls just to flush everyone out. And Superintendent Blackwell can talk about that with the research department, trying to get that, getting early, getting late answers in our system. So I just wanted to take a look at that. Again, it's not an either or. What we are looking for a balanced perspective of how much change and how much disruption for kids can we endure while still honoring parental choice. We would never choose to do this, but given the times of COVID and the anxieties and concerns parents have, we do have to honor those choices at reasonable and logical breaks for kids and for just our system to function properly. Next slide. I'll turn it over to our secondary.
Yes, good evening, trustees. To add to some of the conversations that have already been had, secondary is a little bit different. Obviously, there are some changes in the delivery model. We were told very early on that schools would have to start in the adaptive model. So even the timetabling and the processes around what choices were a little bit different. But again, just as with elementary, this is a process really for a typical year. And this process starts in November. So we're talking about program and pathway information. We talk to kids and talk about the programs that are available, whether they're in the school or whether they're regional programs, community pathways opportunities, and course selection information. And that's in November so that students have the information they need when it comes to February to hand in those course requests. And kids really drive program at schools. So when they select their courses, that information is taken. Our Human Resources Department gives sections to schools based on the number of kids. But schools do the tough work of looking at what students have chosen and we make sure that we build program for those students and make decisions. You know, if 2 students have chosen a course, then maybe that course doesn't run, or there's another alternative for that student. And they have to make decisions based on, you know, fiscal responsibility. We run sections in staff schools based on what's best for kids, but also we have to do it in a way that honors the collective agreement and the numbers of students assigned to teachers. So the additional piece to that is when you're getting a school all ready to go, you're talking about teacher qualifications to support those student choices. Then we get into the transitions pieces and communicating that. And the reason that course selections are done early, not only for staffing and sectioning of schools, but so that that schools can be reaching out to students that they are welcoming. We know that the grade 8 to 9 transitions pieces are a huge piece for students in welcoming them to their secondary school, and those processes run all spring. So Superintendent Potter-Barrick did talk a little bit about setting up classrooms. We're talking about setting up timetables for kids, plans of care are the same, really getting to know the learners that are coming to our building. And then in the fall, in September, in a regular year, there's some of those startup adjustments, not necessarily in a reorganization, but in terms of students may have taken summer school courses, and they then are able to say, well, I already have that credit, so now I'm looking for a different course that I'd like to take in the semester. And schools work really hard to get those resolved as soon as possible so that students can get started early in the year. And as trustees will remember, just a few months ago, we were looking at the responses that were coming in. We also looked at the direction that was given to us around the adaptive learning model, and we looked at what that would look like for staff and for students. So that the decision to run a virtual secondary school was put in place. And that came with many pieces to it. So through this process that we had ready to go for September, basically August 23rd, I believe, the survey closed. The week of the 24th, schools were calling any family that had not responded and trying to get set up so that the virtual school was ready to go on the 16th of September, which is a credit to the work that was done not only in the schools, but centrally to try and have 2 dependent systems, they're not independent, work together so that we could get program ready for students. And so a lot of that work was timetabling for individual students, and we had 3,500 students choose the virtual secondary school. We talk about the staffing pieces, assigning administrators, office clerical support, all of the pieces that we need in place to support a school and support students. So reassigning and relocating staff, and I really, I know that parents had difficult decisions and with their students in terms of selecting that model. There was probably a lot of conversation in terms of, are we going in person or virtual? We also know that we had staff that didn't know what their timetables were up until just before school started. So kudos to our staff for dealing with all the changes and welcoming their students into the first quadmester. And then, of course, getting the technology and the learning resources in place for all students. So there's definitely a lot of learning through that first process. And that first process is going to be repeated 4 times this year because there are 4 quadmesters. So in piggybacking on what Superintendent Potter-Barrick said, we've chosen those dates specifically around best continuity of learning for students. So at the end of quadmester 1, they will have the opportunity to change learning models again for the quadmester 2, 3, and 4. And I've put here at the top the November to September. That wasn't last year's process. That's this year's process for next year. And we're all hopeful that September is back to everyone not having to choose between models necessarily. So again, 4 processes, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done in secondary with each process. And so, as we've said earlier, there's been a lot of learning through the first process. the timelines around receiving the model intent to return survey were very quick, and we had to do some work with that. And now that we know what the work is, we know that we need a significant amount of time, a good month, to get that in place so that we can support students in their program choices. And that's why we're asking families now, which is this week, October 5th to the 13th, to make that determination for the November 16th start date. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. So in secondary, this term quadmester, typically in our high schools, we have 2 semesters that have 4 courses in each semester. This year, and this is part of, I would think, almost all of our schools in the province are running this quadmester model. And so students are taking 2 courses at a time. So we've determined the courses that they would like to take early in the year. Then we worked with the model that they've chosen. And even though they might have already had that course selected at their home school, they may have chosen a virtual school. So all of that staffing and sectioning and adjustments needed to be in place. And so in a year, students can take up to 8 courses. So we'll work with that premise right now, is that students are taking 8 courses in this example. And those 8 courses that they've selected at the beginning of the year are put in place in the place they are now for the year. So whether I'm in person or whether I'm in virtual school, my 8-course timetable is there for me. I'm taking 2 courses at a time. I decide at the end of my first quadmester that I'm going to switch, and we'll just say to a different school. Whether it's a different model or not, it's a different school. I'm going to choose in that next semester, or the next quadmester, I now have to take my 2 courses that I've already got behind me, and I'm looking for 6 courses to finish my year. Those 6 courses that I had in place at my original school, I now need to see if they're available in my new school. And while we have courses that are required for graduation, those courses will be in place. The difference becomes in the electives. An elective like law, for example, it may be offered in a school in 1 slot throughout the year. As I move to a different model, that course may no longer be offered in that new school or the new model that I've chosen. I may have enough kids that choose to come into a different model or return to their home school where there's enough of them that wanted law, and we're able to work with our timetables in the school to offer that. What gets tricky is when we have courses that are required courses that have very low enrollment. And low enrollment, an example might be a grade 11 workplace math course. Usually schools will offer that once in a year. So if it's offered in the first quadmester at my home school and at the virtual school, then I may need to have an alternate program pathway, which means I might be taking it first semester in my grade 12 year to get that credit. So schools are going to have to work with individual circumstances, and they do that. It just gets really tricky because when timetables change, then that means that staffing needs to change as well. So each quadmester, the choices for students as they move, if they choose to move models between quadmester 2 and 3, now they're down to 4 courses that they want to have and hope that there's 4 courses that are available for them. The last quadmester, they have 2 courses left that they're looking to have. We hope that it's offered at where they're returning to or if they're going to virtual school. So it gets very complex, and there's a lot of work done at the school level, as we've mentioned, very specialized in terms of staffing it, and also in the work in picking student by student and trying to honor those courses. And our schools have done an amazing job in trying to do that. I think the next person. So here's just a very quick overview. There's impact. Every time we have a change in models, there's impact to not only students, but their families, the schools, the system, and schools being staff, administration, movement, support staff. We're moving staff, we're finding locations for them to work, we're trying to connect them with their peers. And you'll see that if you look at over the learning model selection, the options, there are multiple pathways that kids could have. So I might start in person in August, I might remain in person at my home school, and then I might choose in February to move to online. And I haven't added the April. It's just the number of different possibilities and of pathways that students could have. So there are definitely lots of implications. Just in terms of quick overview, and Superintendent Potter-Barrick's made this comment, the implications every time there's a model switch opportunity, it's not just the students that are choosing to move, there are implications for all students. So that you might have a different educator in secondary or in elementary because a course has changed, a course has collapsed, a teacher's had to move to virtual school, or a teacher's chosen to move from virtual school to in-person. There's obviously community building that happens with new peers. With quadmesters and in secondary, students are pretty used to having a different group of kids with them in every course that they take. But it is getting to know that if you're working within a different community that's not your home school, sometimes that's challenging. Your peer relationships that you've established, just even the routines, the timing for virtual school and in-person school will be different. Program and assessment may look different in those changes for all students. In terms of secondary specifically, we talked a little bit about elective limitations and then pathways and regional program issues. We are not, when we made the decision to move from our 4-course 5-period model to quadmesters, we found that we were not able to offer different pathways, regional programs in virtual school, and that will continue to be the case. Part of that is around the staffing in the schools. So IB, iSTEM, there are other examples as well. And in terms of families, this impacts not only students, but their families. Those are selecting and those who aren't. We know that families are crucial in supporting transitions for students. So whenever there is a change in model, even having those relationships established within the school that they're in, now knowing who to go to, knowing who to contact, access for support. When you're changing a model, that has definitely an impact on families in terms of reconfiguring or realigning their relationships with schools. And then obviously a change in the school community as a whole. So parents are a big part of that community. I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Potter-Barrick.
Thank you. I'll just talk quickly around the implications for schools and the system. I mean, if kids came in bundles of 15 or 20, this would certainly be a lot easier, but they don't. We recognize it's 2 or 3 kids in a class, spread across over thousands and thousands of classrooms. So it makes it a very complex process when to create a new class and where to take the teacher from in that other organization. And we're always looking at that. That's why picking certain dates across the year allows us to have better strategy around that and make better decisions around where those arrangements will hold. The last thing we want to do is reorganize a classroom in a school, then come back again and say, oh, same bad move again. So this gives us a chance to get that right. More information in a bit more time allows better decisions for schools. Again, we've mentioned the balance in the class lists that we lose, the culture that can be lost within a classroom when students have to join a different class. The affiliation with that teacher is gone. Usually those of you who have had kids go through the system really see that the nervousness transforms to happiness really quickly, usually by the end of the first week. and that's the best teacher they've ever had in their life. So interrupting that is really hard. And schools will say that the communications with families can be really tough around kids who do not want to move, yet we're down. It can involve more split grades or combined grade classrooms in schools, which are curricularly justified, but certainly not popular in the parent realms. Supervision and qualifications, having French, planning time collapses timetables. You really have to rebuild sometimes a whole school timetable or a whole supervision school. When you lose a little bit of a piece, it's kind of like a game of Jenga. The whole thing can come down. So you've really got to be strategic around that, and keep in mind we're asking schools to do that 2, 3, 4 times this year. So again, with a recognition of where we are with COVID, but to have more of that, to offer some sort of fluid weekly intake would just really be tough. Our teachers and principals are facing a lot now, but to add that a fluid intake onto them would I will say here, not to be provocative, but would be a tipping point. And just for the next slide, just implications for us as a system. We're building some drama here for the next slide. I'm going to go ahead. There we go. Just the timelines around our union partners who have been very understanding and supportive of us. However, we still have a need to uphold collective agreements around staffing processes, seniority pieces, in terms of who's moving, who's not, all of those pieces. Our processes are not just impacting teachers. It's early childhood educators, educational assistants. It has an impact on our other support staff who are supporting students, and our administrators, of course, who have to broker this at the school level. So just through all of that, our desire to limit the amount of movement. You can see some other pieces here in terms of class regulations and size, but I'm hopeful we've made our point. And just the last slide again highlights the upcoming changes, which are happening in November 16th and November 30th. And just for everyone's information, we're calling it a form. The form opened for, because not everyone has to complete this. It's not a survey, it's a form. So only parents seeking a move would complete the form. It closes October 13th for secondary, and October 27th will close for elementary. That one isn't out there yet, but it will be. And we're really hoping and pushing that parents will. So we're getting schools to communicate this, of communications communicating it. We'll all be tweeting these dates out because it's so important to have that information, because you now know what has to happen between October 13th and November 16th. It used to be March to August, and now we're going basically October 13th to November 16th. A lot of work has to happen. So it's all of those late pieces and other little requests that can really stumble up an already really accelerated process. So we're certainly open and available for questions if trustees would.
May I just, Chair Drabens, make one final comment?
Yes.
And that's with that, Superintendent Blackwell, could you put that last slide back up, please? And I know this was a presentation on the complexity of it, but I think it's important that trustees are aware, and even more so any public that may be watching this live or watch it later on recorded. We are going to hold firm on those closing dates. As you've seen the complexity of changing these processes, and the biggest problem, the biggest issue is, and Superintendent Padre-Merrick mentioned it, every change has a counter change. So if parents and students are coming in at secondary after October 13th and say, oh, we changed our mind on October 20th. It's not simple. It's not a simple, okay, you could go to virtual or you could go to face-to-face, because we have to find what the other move is. So every change of one student impacts many other students. And the same with elementary. I know this is not popular, and I know for parents and kids, this is really challenging, really difficult, because I would bet the vast majority of kids want to be in face-to-face with their teachers, but they're not in face-to-face with their teachers for various reasons, primarily around health of their family members, anxiety, safety, and all those. And we completely understand those and support those. But as a system with 66,000 kids and thousands of teachers, the impact needs to be, we have to attend to the impact that late changes come. And that's the problem. That's the disconnect, I think, which is difficult for parents to understand. They don't quite understand that because it's only their child they're talking about. But what they have to understand is it's a giant ecosystem, and every move impacts every other move. And so therefore I just want to reiterate that, you know, we're going to hold tight to these dates. If you'll recall, we were a bit delayed in starting virtual school this semester. We started it after we had started face-to-face. And one of the reasons was because we allowed people after the dates to make changes. And therefore we had to make those changes, staff it, and do all those other things. So I just want to reiterate that, and we will send messaging out in that regard. So with that, I'll turn it back to Chair Drabens for questions from trustees to our two presenters. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Miller. The first speaker on the speakers list is Trustee Shuttleworth. Go right ahead.
Thank you. I think this is a question to Superintendent Blackwell. And I'm not sure if this is the right place to ask this question or not, but you spoke about the adaptive model that we are in right now. And in the summer, when we were looking at these plans, there was that November time that school boards were going to maybe be able to change the secondary model. Just wondering, because right now secondary is in Halton is part-time, whereas in other boards that are further afield, it is full adapted full-time. But and although Halton does have rising COVID cases, we seem to be getting it right in schools because there's not spread within the schools. So my question is, are we assuming that we are staying with the part-time model in secondary school?
Through the chair to Trustee Shuttleworth, yeah, good memory. That direction to be in the adaptive model came from the Ministry of Education, and then we're adhering to that. And at the time, they would reconsider and look at what the cases look like or what the situation was. As you've said, COVID cases are on the rise. Halton's done a pretty good job, but we would take direction for any change from the ministry. And public health would advise on that. So it does not look like we will be moving from that anytime soon. I don't know if Director Miller wants to jump in here.
No, I would just add that through you, Chair Drabens, to Trustee Shuttleworth, we are one of 24 boards in the province that were designated. We are a designated board, hence that's why we did the adaptive model. In the conversations that I've been involved with, and I know the chair of the board has been involved with them, there has been no talk of changing those designations.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm looking to the speakers list, and right now there's nobody on it, so I will ask questions because I always have questions. So this is more for clarity. So at the elementary level, some parents think that removing students from a face-to-face situation will improve and reduce class sizes in our bricks and mortar classrooms. Can you please explain why this is not the case? And also please relate it back to ministry funding and class size averages regulations.
I'd be happy to answer that one through the chair, to the chair. Yeah, our our staffing is we have the teachers that we have, and we have the kids that we have. Us moving around, or parents choosing to move kids around, is not garnering any more funding for that. So you create a class. It's a neutral move. You create a class somewhere else. You find the staff for that class somewhere else. The funding we've largely been given is out there, and that's already, I would say, factored into a lot of our classes. The notion that if 6 kids leave a face-to-face class that was at 25, yeah, now it's at 19. But if that school then loses a classroom, not at all, right? They don't lose a class at all. So, of course, it's not as simple as one leaves a school to another school. I mean, it could hit different schools. You never know. And that's what looking at the overall board averages determines that. But as a concept, it's not true that it will lower class face-to-face class numbers. We've managed to lower them quite successfully, but it's through other mitigating strategies, like having strategically more kids in a virtual classroom without the health and safety concerns than a face-to-face classroom, or ways like that. Not through some additional staffing we received from the ministry, which is very helpful, but like I said, it didn't significantly move the averages. So I would say I wish that was the case, but it is not the case.
Okay, thank you. I'm looking to the speakers list. There are new trustees that have jumped on, so I will come back on later with more questions. But Trustee Gray, go right ahead.
Thank you very much, through the chair, and to Superintendent Podrick and Superintendent Blackwell. It's clear through your presentation tonight that the ability to pivot, be flexible, has greatly been demonstrated by our board. Lots of work has gone on, and the cooperation of our different union groups to see their way through and clear to some of these changes at the last minute has been greatly appreciated. All of this, of course, to ensure the success through this accelerated process, the success for our students. So we very much appreciate that. My question is this: is there a point in time, and I'm asking this question based on the trends that I'm seeing in different boards around us, and in knowing the numbers are rising with COVID, but is there a point at which there would be a situation perhaps created whereby there would be too many students asking to go virtual, and therefore compromising our ability to produce a in-face class?
I mean, that's a little bit of speculation. I think we're going to find that out soon with when our forms close on those dates. We'll get a good sense. We've seen the responses coming in from some other GTA boards, and it assumes that certainly the virtual numbers are climbing, and the requests to go face-to-face to virtual is a trend, and we expect to see that here. But the ability to no longer offer face-to-face learning in our schools, I don't foresee that happening, Trustee Gray. I think a board of our size, we will always have options around it. As Superintendent Blackwell said, sometimes the choice of students will become limited. I think you will definitely see that happening in terms of course selection or choice among classrooms. A school may have had 2 grade 5 classrooms, and now they have 1. So kids they wanted to maybe keep apart or together. So there's things like that, but I would not foresee circumstances that would totally collapse the model. And I think in Halton, with the number of working families that we have, I would think it would have to be fairly dire, to the point the province almost considering what we did last spring. That would happen before we couldn't operate schools with face-to-face learning. But that's just my opinion. Director Miller, if you Your crystal ball is a little more clear than mine, perhaps.
Through you, Chair Drabens, to Trustee Gray, I think my crystal ball is as foggy as yours is. Our priority is to keep our schools open, and that's virtual and the brick and mortar schools, and for face-to-face learning. The consequences, I think, are more likely, and Superintendent Podribarek mentioned it, as did Superintendent Blackwell. For secondary school students in particular, it may be a real narrowing of the choices of courses that they can take. If we lose more and more students, there may be fewer opportunities for optional courses in a brick and mortar school because there's just not a critical mass of students to be able to do it. Because again, it's the same thing. If we get down to a number of 4 or 5 students in a class taking a optional area like, say, law, which was an example used here, the principal would have to make a decision. Can you run that law class? And the chances of that doing when we've got a simultaneously virtual school running are probably 0 to nil that you would be able to run that class. So for students, there are real consequences about them pursuing their optional areas and their, which are quite often are their passions and their dreams. So, but I do agree with Superintendent Podribarek. I think that other boards would hit that spot before us, and the province would have a real crisis on their hand that there would need to be provincial direction around how we attend to a situation as dire as that, with where you're unable to run face-to-face schools. So,
Do you have a follow-up at all?
Just a comment, if I could. I would like to just thank Superintendent Podribarek and Superintendent Blackwell for the presentation tonight. I would find this particularly helpful if that presentation was made a clip and then available to us tomorrow so that we could share it out. It's just so many questions that seem to be that this is the topic, you know, and I think this would provide some clarity to parents as to the complexities of such a decision and of the timelines that we have instituted in order to move forward with this whole process. So that's just a request that I would make. Thank you.
through you, Chair Drabens, to Trustee Gray, it will be posted on the website. I'm not sure whether we could get a clip up and ready by tomorrow morning, but I'm not the technical person on this call. But by all means, we will share that with trustees for them to use. I'm just not sure it can happen by tomorrow morning. I would look at the perhaps Kevin Raposo or Superintendent Truffin to see if that's a possibility. But otherwise, it'll be on the board's website.
Okay, the next speaker on the speakers list is Trustee Oliver. Go right ahead. You have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Chair. This question is for Superintendent Podribarek, I believe. In the elementary panel, if a student is instructed by public health to isolate because of their exposure to a case with diagnosed with COVID, presently that student is directed to undertake self-learning at home by accessing Google Classroom, and they have access to their teacher and administrative support if required. Given this, I've had a question from a family asking whether it would be possible for these students to shift to the virtual school for that period of isolation and then return back to in-class learning when possible. Can you please speak to that, whether that's possible, and if not, why not? Thank you.
Yes, it's not possible because that's a permanent shift. What we have for kids that are out sick or away from school that attend face-to-face is they would monitor the class asynchronously from home with check-ins by the school. Moving kids in and out, that would be even further moves into virtual schools and not, would be a whole different teacher. It would be very disconnected experience. It wouldn't know any of the other kids They wouldn't know the learning pathway of that classroom. And then they would then go back to the regular class. What we suggest is far more connected, is just to stay a part of the regular classroom, monitor that, and the teacher and that school staff checks in on the student for the duration of their absence. And we do that again from a learning coherence piece for the children. And again, if they are homesick, we still feel it keeps them connected to their classroom. And the feedback we've been getting has been fairly positive on that right now. What we don't want to do is that Google Classroom check-in, monitor asynchronously for elementary. That's not to be a permanent state for kids. So we are, through our November 30th, people that are waiting to change perhaps to virtual. Once we accommodate that, then they'll be in virtual. So we're really trying to keep those two separate now. But I hope that's answered your question with a high degree of clarity.
And through you, Chair Drabens, can I just add something to that for Trustee Oliver?
Go ahead.
I think one of the challenges that parents are having is the understanding that the virtual schools are schools. They are separate schools. They are not an arm of the brick and mortar school. It's a completely different school. So the analogy would be along the lines, if a student in, and I'll pick a couple of schools in Oakville, for example, a student in Pilgrim Wood is off ill in normal times when we're not dealing with COVID, is off ill for a couple of weeks, or their parents go away and the kid's away for 2 weeks, and they say, can my child go to Abbey Lane for those 2 weeks? That would be very challenging to do in terms of the organizing of schools. And this is exactly the same. And I think this is where it's a whole paradigm shift that we're asking parents, communities, trustees, and staff, including ourselves, to try to get our heads around that the virtual school is a completely different school. So moving kids in and out has impacts on the school they've left, et cetera, and so on. So I just thought I'd augment Superintendent Podraberic's superlative description with that. So.
Do you have a follow-up at all, Trustee Oliver?
So related to that, on the secondary panel front, given that there is the cohort A and B, and basically they're part of the same class, it's just they're taking turns being in class and online. If a student falls ill or has to, not even with COVID, just is ill with some other illness, or has to isolate due to exposure to COVID, and they cannot attend in person, are they able to follow the class along in the virtual format? Is that up to the discretion of the teacher, or is that kind of an agreement that an understanding that that's how it would work in the secondary panel?
So through the chair to Trustee Oliver, the secondary, as you're familiar with, is 3 hours in the morning. And that 3 hours, if it's let's take law again. If it's a law class, half the students are face-to-face and half of the students are at home learning. So what that at-home learning looks like, it could be some synchronous and asynchronous. The teacher will determine that. It's actually an easier option for students that are at home that are still able to work, right? Some of them will be ill and unable to partake in any learning. But they are able to learn with the cohort that's at home. So it's fairly straightforward, and then it's always a synchronous afternoon piece.
Okay. The next speaker on the speakers list is Trustee Reynolds. You have the floor.
Thank you, through the chair. My question is regarding the elementary panel. I've heard from some parents who are worried about this upcoming reorganization and how this could impact their in-school and virtual school class sizes. I'm wondering if you could just address or provide some commitment or messaging on the strategies that we're going to use or the schools will use to maintain class sizes. I think that what they want to, what I'm concerned about is parents literally fearing that this next change will dramatically impact the class size. And they just want, I guess, some assurances of what that could look like. Because some who are happy staying in class want to remain, but there's some fear there. So I'm just wondering if you could take a moment to just reflect on what I think parents need to hear right now.
Yes, through the chair to Trustee Reynolds, we totally understand that parent anxieties. Class size has been long time, and it's only intensified this year with the public health pieces we're looking at. It's very difficult to guarantee a single parent what the implications would be. For a single classroom, their bottom line is some will go up and some may go down. I would say as a board, we have certain averages now we're very happy with on face-to-face. That doesn't mean there are some outlier classrooms that are higher than we would like to see. There may be actually opportunities to reduce those, but from a board average perspective, we can certainly say that, yeah, we're going to try and hold to that. Because again, we're not gaining kids a net as a system. They are the same, and we can probably, with a pretty high degree of certainty, hold to those averages. But I could say, as soon as I say to a parent, yeah, your classrooms won't budge, that will be one of those outliers that happens to go up a few children. So it's really difficult to make individual assurances, but as a whole board, we've got those averages, and we're going to try to stick to those the best we can. As we do that, that's one of the benefits of being able to look and collect all of this data and then make good decisions, as I kind of noted earlier, is to keep a keen eye on those class sizes.
And through your chair of events, to Trustee Reynolds, that question illustrates perfectly the challenge with this. That's what might lead to classes having to be closed if there's too many moving out and reorging and so on. So I think this is, I think Superintendent Podribaric's right on the money. It's we have complete empathy and understanding of how parents must feel in these circumstances. But assurances, I think, would be misguided for us to give any kind of assurances, not very transparent, and be quite frankly, not honest of us to give those assurances. And I think we have to try to be as honest as we can. There's an impact, and that impact may cause the very things we were talking about before.
Do you have a follow-up, Trustee Reynolds? No. Okay. Looking to the speakers list, there's no one after Trustee Reynolds, so I have questions. So actually two questions that are related. One is kind of piggybacking on what Director Miller said, that these are completely different schools. You have to think of the virtual school as a completely separate, pretend it has bricks and mortar around it, but it is conceptual. So at the secondary level, as students entered this year, and if they were in a face-to-face situation, and they received a schedule, let's MM Robinson's in this parking lot, so I'll choose that school. So let's say we have an MM Robinson student, started the year, got a 4 quadmester schedule. These are the 2 courses next, 2 courses next, 2 courses next. If they decide to change to the virtual school, that for the second quadmester, that basically potentially, especially as they get into their upper years, could wipe their slate out, and they, even though they had, grade 12 physics and robotics in quadmester 2 scheduled, that is probably not what they're going to have in quadmester 2 in the virtual school. Could you please clarify that?
Through the chair to the chair, you are correct. All schools have different schedules. And as you said, as you pointed out, that it is a different school. There is no school in any of our systems that have the exact same courses on the exact same time. So moving from one school to a next in any situation would mean that the schedules don't line up in the course offerings. So not every school has robotics. Use that as an example. It may not be an option in the virtual school. So those will be decisions and elective courses, and that's where our guidance counselors always reach out and say, this isn't available, but this is, and work with kids to provide program that helps them on their pathway, because there are a lot of options that students have.
Okay, as a follow-up, now let's say that, and I'm trying to just relate this to concrete examples, because I think that's what parents are going to understand the most. And so if, again, we have a student, let's say MM Robinson, has a full schedule going in, and they get to quadmester 2. There have been a number, maybe they have Spanish, or I don't think they offer Spanish there, but Spanish and English schedule for quadmester 2. But there's been a number of people that have left, or that the teacher is needed someplace else. There is a possibility that their quadmester 2 is not written in stone. Is this correct?
Through the chair to the chair, this is correct, and more so the impact would probably be on courses where there's already a small number of students in that course, right? Most of our courses, the averages are fairly high. If we look at some of the data that's coming back, it's basically about 25% at each grade level. You're looking at a couple of students from each grade level across schools right now, and that's, again, preliminary data. So those courses with smaller enrollment, definitely, if a large number come out, and overall the school's enrollment, if it decreases, then the number of sections need to be reallocated, right? It's not that we get all of a sudden more sections to add to another school. They need to come from somewhere, because we're funded and staffed that way. That being said, those courses may need to collapse also in terms of teaching qualifications. So a teacher, we are going to need staff. If we have an increased number of students, we'll need an increased number of staff, and they need to come from somewhere. So, it's a puzzle piece, and as Superintendent Potter-Barrick mentioned earlier on, these are not independent processes. These depend on each other. And we've got all these schools, if you can picture that image, all of the secondary schools and the virtual school, and it's in and out, and it's crossing around, and it's looking at each course and what students have taken. So all these kids that are coming from one school may choose robotics. That's a very specialized program at MM Robinson. But nobody else is choosing robotics because they don't have that option. So it might create opportunity for someone in a virtual school. But hopefully I've answered your question. There is a risk of a class closing and an option or an elective needing to be reselected for students.
Okay, so just our schedules are penciled rather than in hard ink, basically, for the year. Okay. Looking to the speakers list, I've had some trustees jump on. So first time speaker, Trustee Rocha.
Thank you. Through the chair to Superintendent Blackwell. Just to follow up on Chair Grebence's questions, are high school students being made aware of the implications of their choices from switching learning models? I mean, we're hearing about it tonight, but are they aware, truly aware of what their decision-making might imply to their courses for the rest of the year?
Through the chair to Trustee Rocha, when the students are selecting, or when the choice is being made to switch models, we've added acknowledgement statements to that form, so that parents are very much aware around the fact that regional programs will not be offered. Some regional programs like iSTEM and IB, they're not offered. There may be a limitation in some of the French immersion offerings in secondary as well as elementary. So there is that acknowledgement piece, and we know that hopefully parents are having conversations with their children when they're acknowledging these pieces. It's a big decision, right? And we know that it's not one that's taken lightly, and that families are working together. So some of those statements, again, to go back and they will have a copy of their form that they filled out. I would strongly recommend that families go through that if they haven't already had that conversation with their children. As we're speaking tonight, or as I'm hearing the questions tonight, I'm not sure that the students that are not doing a model change form are even thinking that this is a possibility. So that's something for us to have conversations with our administrators in terms of sharing some of that information and making sure that the student body is informed. I think that's really important.
Do you have a follow-up at all?
No follow-up, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, second time speaker, Trustee Oliver.
Thank you, through you, Chair. To further build on this conversation, it is concerning to hear that as secondary students change their options of learning modalities, that it may impact not only on their own course selection, but on the course options of others. What I'm hearing is that administration will work with the student impacted by the change and offer optional course selections. But what if it is a very particular course to a pathway? Would administration ever look to a virtual school and say this course is offered at a particular virtual school along with maybe the second course for that quadmester, or a course from a subsequent quadmester that the student has selected, and so move the student into the virtual school for those course options for that quadmester and then have them come back? Is that something that's under consideration? Is it feasible? And can it be, what's the advice there?
Great question, through the chair to Trustee Oliver. Some of these processes do happen on a regular basis, right? We have students that may choose to do a night school course, and then there's adjustments to their timetable later on in the year. So schools work with those adjustments mid-year on a regular basis. The virtual school hours and the in-person school hours are very different. So the virtual school hours are 250-minute chunks, and so it doesn't necessarily model having an in-person class with a virtual school class. The hours don't align. That being said, there are lots of other alternatives that we can look at to support students, and schools are very much aware of them. We often don't talk about our e-learning courses that are available to students as a second option. It's separate from virtual school. We have other opportunities. Schools have specific opportunities around ILC courses. And so they're very creative in supporting students. And, we hope that some of the courses that are collapsing, maybe they're a grade 10 English and there's 6 sections of grade 10 English, that it doesn't affect the course choice per se. It affects the position of where it might be in your timetable. So that's something that schools do all the time.
Do you have a follow-up? Okay, I think this will be my last question. And it's more, again, I'm kind of whacking this over our heads. So let's say, like, I'm a parent, I have a child in grade 6, and I am not changing modalities. He's in face-to-face. But at the end of November, even though I have not chosen to move him into a different modality, he could end up with a different teacher or in a different class with different students. And so if you could just clarify that, and then I'll follow up.
Yes, through the chair to the chair, that could absolutely happen. It could happen in any year. The scope of it's going to be much larger this year and have many more points of possibility. So yes, that can happen. It's kind of the dark side of school reorganization, right? It brings in kids who didn't want to be brought into the process. So we'll do a handful of these in a regular given year, but this year it may be a bushel full. So it will happen. To say it wouldn't would be unrealistic and dishonest.
Okay, and just to further clarify, that would be November and February and one more time, or is it just November and February for elementary?
Yeah, thanks for that question. At this point, we've just got those next 2 dates confirmed for elementary. We can certainly look forward. There's not another reporting period. That's kind of why we fixed right there. From February on is kind of second term, not being a progress report, breaking it up in there. But we have discussed the option around that. Where do we want to sit? It's getting very late in the year to add another reorg. We don't have a logical break like we would in secondary, but it looms as a possibility depending where things are with COVID and all of that.
Okay, and one final follow-up to that adds right on to this is that a family, if they are in virtual and they stay in virtual, they could still be facing a reorg themselves depending on what the outcome is.
Yes, that's possible as well. For example, if you had a reorganization of classes where you had to create a split grade, you didn't quite have enough for a full, and you created split grades to look at averages and things like that. I think it's more likely, Chair Grabent, in our face-to-face model to be reorg, just because the number of kids, the tide's going that direction. So I think it's more likely we'll be having those families unknowingly up for reorganization in the face-to-face, I would say.
Okay, thank you. I looked at the speakers list and there are no more speakers on the speakers list. And though I have many questions percolating in my head, they're not fully formed yet. So I know I can reach out to you if I have more questions. But we shall move from this topic. Thank you very much. Very informative and important topic to cover as we head forward, forever forward in our march through this pandemic. So thank you very much, both of you and Director Miller, for bringing this forward. Okay, so we are now up to, did you have something to say, Superintendent Podrick?
No, just thank you for your comments.
I do appreciate that this cycle of reorganization and upheaval is very hard on students, but it is also incredibly hard on staff, and takes a lot of work. And I feel for the staff that are going to basically be in perpetual organizational mode for this entire year. Director Miller, I see you've popped on the screen. Would you like to say something?
Yes, thank you, Chair Dervance. Through you, Chair Dervance. I was just actually going to make some of that comment, and it's not that we are looking for kind of empathy for staff or whatever, but it is very difficult for staff. But the main reason it's difficult for staff is because it's tough educationally. The teachers and the principals and the vice principals and the EAs and the ECEs, they're in a perpetual change motion with their students. And our business, our education, the primary mode and vehicle for education is the relationships we build with students and kids. And that is far more challenging in these circumstances for our teachers and our EAs and our ECEs And I worry about our marginalized and racialized students even more, because sometimes they need to be, because we're in a system right now which there is constant racism around, and systemic racism, and they see it on the TV, and they may need more support, and it's more difficult to provide that support for these kids. So, you know, being in a relationship business, it's hard to do so when you're constantly focused on changing the modality and reorganizing and doing that. And so I think it's important that to acknowledge the words that you just said around the difficulty of it, but it makes it more challenging for the kids to learn and achieve and be successful. Very confidence in the staff, complete and utter confidence in our staff to help these students, but their abilities to do so are somewhat mitigated because the sustainability of the relationships they're building are a little more fragile, because of they might be changed in a quad and so on. So they'll have fewer months to be with these students. So with that, I'll pass it back to you, Chair Devine.
Okay, thank you. So now we are up to 3.0 consent agenda items. So Trustee Oliver, would you like to move a motion to deal with the consent agenda?
Yes, I move the motion.
Thank you. Trustee Amos, would you like to second?
Yes, I would. Thank you.
Excellent. I'll put the motion on the floor. Be it resolved that the Halton District School Board approve the consent agenda action items and receive the information items for October 7th, 2020. Is there any discussion or any items that need to be pulled? If so, could you please put your name on the speakers list? Okay, seeing none, I will call the question. Could you please go to your voting form? All those in favor? That carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, so we are now up to 4.0 ratification action items, and we amended the agenda to include approval of business transacted in private session. Vice Chair Al Harrison, do we have any business from private session that requires approval?
Yes, we do, Madam Chair. We have 4 motions. So I will start with the first one. Be it resolved that the Halton District School Board ratify the Memorandum of Settlement which was reached with the designated early childhood educators, DECE, at FO on September 22nd, 2020, and I so move.
Thank you. Trustee Collard, would you like to second this motion?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there any discussion at all? Looking to the speakers list. Seeing none, so all those in favor. And that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Vice Chair Al Harrison, do you have another motion? Oh, you do have another motion. Please express your next motion.
Okay. Be it resolved that the Halton District School Board ratify the Memorandum of Settlement that was reached with the Halton Elementary teachers at FO on October 2nd, 2020.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Reynolds, would you like to second this motion?
I would be pleased to second that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Looking to the speakers list. Seeing none, all those in favor? And that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Vice Chair Al Harrison, on to your next motion.
Okay. Next motion, be it resolved that the Halton District School Board ratify the memorandum of settlement that was reached with the Halton Elementary Occasional Teachers, HEOT, at vote on September 29th, 2020, and I so move.
Thank you. Trustee Daniele, would you like to second this motion?
Yes, thank you, I would.
Excellent. Looking to the speakers list. Seeing none, all those in favor? And that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Before we head off into the next motion, because the next one is different, I think we should say something about these motions. I want to thank staff for and the teacher unions for coming together to negotiate in good faith in these times, and we are glad that an agreement has been made with all of these separate federations, and we look forward to a continued good relationship, and hopefully these agreements will be ratified on the other end. Okay, so Vice Chair Harrison, you have yet another motion to bring to the table.
Yes, I do. Be it resolved that the Halton District School Board of Trustees accept the 2019-2020 Audit Committee Annual Private Session Report to the Board of Trustees, and I so move.
Trustee Garrett, I know that you're listed on here, but I was wondering if Trustee Gray would like to second this motion, as she is the outgoing chair for this committee.
Yes, I would. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Trustee Garrett, for that. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? There we go. And that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, so we are charging through this agenda now. So for action this evening, we actually have no action items. The long-term accommodation plan link is available in the agenda, and it will return to the agenda package at the next regular board meeting for action on October 21st. I was wondering, however, if General Manager Thibault has any updated information that he'd like to share with regards to the consultation in the LTAP, or on the LTAP.
Evening. Through Chair Gerbens, I would say that in terms of the feedback survey, what we can tell you is that there's approximately 797 responses for this year's LTAP, so it's quite a significant number over what we're accustomed to, so it's good news. And we're looking to report in more details on what the contents of that feedback was at our Committee of the Whole meeting next Wednesday on October 14th, which will provide a presentation giving some metrics as to who responded, where were they located, some of their primary concerns, and some of the three themes of the comments that they had provided. So happy to take any additional questions in advance of the meeting, but till then, yeah, we look forward to presenting the information.
Excellent. I would think that we can hold on to our questions for the committee of the whole meeting. That meeting is live streamed, so people will be able to tune in to see and learn more about the results of the long-term accommodation plan consultation. But I am very impressed with the numbers at this point. Thank you so much for that. Okay, so we are moving on to communications to the board. And the first item is number 5.1, student trustee reports. Trustee Taylor, do you have a report for us this evening?
I do indeed.
Go right
So
ahead.
through the chair to all trustees and senior administration, we have two items included on this report tonight, Senate and climate declaration updates. So for Senate, last week we did send out a letter to all principals of the elementary and secondary schools, as well as the virtual schools in Halton, asking for the appointment of senators. Each elementary school may appoint one senator and secondary schools may appoint two. In addition, this year with the virtual schools, virtual secondary schools may appoint 4, and the virtual elementary school may appoint 3 senators. Each school is responsible for how their senator is selected, and we encourage students to reach out to their in-person or virtual principal if they are interested in joining Senate, depending on which model they're partaking in. More information can be found on the Senate Instagram and soon the official website, and Student Senate will commence on October 27th, and we're very much looking forward to our first meeting of the year. And then as for the climate declaration, me and Vandy, who unfortunately couldn't be here, but we would first like to thank Trustee Burwell for printing the climate declarations out and getting them ready to send out to schools. And so one of the primary goals of this declaration was the environmental award, which will be given out to a few outstanding students each year who we feel have contributed to making our board a greener one. And we also wanted it to be hung in schools and sent to politicians so that Ontario and Canada really know that Halton you very seriously. Thank you, Chair Grant. And lastly, we will be sending out a survey every year to have students tell us how they think we are doing environmentally.
Thank you very much. I know I'm only on the screen if I speak. So this is what the climate declaration plaques will look like. They're a solid plaque that will go on the wall. Thank you very much. They are beautiful, and obviously we have some very talented graphic designers who make that look beautiful. I see that we have a speaker on the speakers list, Trustee Shuttleworth. The floor is yours.
Hi, thank you. This is for Trustee Taylor. I just have a question as to how you arrived at the number of senators for the virtual schools.
So we decided that because the virtual schools were a little bigger than the brick and mortar schools, and because some schools maybe, like some students may be going back to the in-person model, we decided to have more. So just in case, like let's say we only had 2 senators and they both went to the brick and mortar school, they would be left with none. So that way now we have a little bit more wiggle room with the amount of senators that they have in those schools.
Okay, thank you.
Director Miller?
Through you, Chair Drevents, to Trustee Taylor. I want to applaud you and Trustee Windalacara. It's not easy. You're brand new student trustees in a really difficult environment and different environment than any of our student trustees have ever experienced. And we've been talking a lot about how staff have pivoted to things, how we pivoted to different modalities. Well, good for you guys to pivot in to ensure that the students in the virtual schools are represented as well. I think that's pretty amazing in pretty short notice. So well done to the two of you.
Thank you very much.
That's excellent. And I hope that with student senators, I know that in some past years, when it's been a more face-to-face model, it's been hard to get some of our far-flung schools to submit senators to the Senate. Is it looking like, I know this is still early days, but is it looking like we may have some senators from schools we haven't heard from in a while?
So like you said, it is very early. We've only had a few submissions so far. And unfortunately, Trustee Vidya-Lankara isn't here. She would know a little bit more about schools that have previously sent senators, because unfortunately this is my first year with Senate. But as I said, yeah, we've only received 4 or 5 emails so far from principals.
Okay, it's great. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing more about it in upcoming meetings. That's very exciting. And I don't see any other speakers on the speakers list. Thank you so much for your report.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we're moving on to action items for October 14th. Sometimes we have items that with established criteria that need to come to the board table more than one time. The first time is for information. The second is for consideration consideration for approval. We have one item, and that is electronic meetings policy amendments. And it was actually submitted by Vice Chair Al Harrison and Trustee Collard, report 20094. Vice Chair Al Harrison or Trustee Collard, would you like to speak to this report?
I could speak to it if that's all right.
Go ahead. I'll just add on.
The reason for the change to the policy is completely and 100% due to the COVID pandemic. We need to be able to offer all trustees the ability to engage in meetings, whether they're from a remote location or at the board office. And given the nature of the pandemic, we can never be sure how long we will be able to have people meeting at the board. We are now in our second wave, and we just don't know what the future holds. So this motion is brought forward to ensure that we will continue to be able to conduct business in a timely manner.
Vice Chair Al Harrison, would you like to speak to the second portion?
Yes, sure. Thanks very much. Through you, Madam Chair. The other piece of this is related to Ontario Regulation 463/97. So the 97 means that this regulation was created in 1997, which, you know, last week seems like a world away. 97, I don't even know what to say about that, especially in the context of electronic meetings. So the second part of the motion is a request to write to the Minister of Education to update that regulation. It doesn't take into account the extraordinary circumstances that we find ourselves in today, or perhaps the next extraordinary circumstance that could warrant fully digital meetings, and also just in recognition of where we are technologically. We can have these meetings fairly efficiently in this manner. So that's part B of that motion. Now, I would just ask a procedural question if that's okay. So this is just a check that because it is, part one is a policy change for us related to our policy on electronic meetings, that we do in fact have to wait until that second meeting. That's a question mark, or whether we could be approving this tonight because it makes imminent sense for at the wisdom of the board on both of those questions.
Director Miller, you have something to say?
I think the board is going to have to make the decision. Sorry, through your chair, to Vice Chair Al Harrison. It's a very good question. As you know, normally these policies would also sit on our site for 25 days for input from the community. There seems to be an urgency, well, there is an urgency to this, to bring this up to the reality of how we're having to conduct business. So my personal view is that I think you would be able to waive the rules on this tonight, since it's really just about how we conduct the business as opposed to a policy change impacting the education of the kids. So that would be my personal view, but it's obviously a trustee decision, not mine. I'm just giving my opinion. Thank you.
I think we could have a conversation on it if someone would like to make a motion to suspend the rules.
I'll make such a motion.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Collard. Seconded by Vice Chair Al Harrison.
Sure.
Okay, and I'm just going to go to the speakers list. So this is about suspending the rules to be able to deal with it this evening. Does anybody have anything they'd like to say, or shall we go to a vote? I'm just looking to the speakers list. Trustee Collard, go right ahead.
Yes, normally the reason why we would want to have this come to 2 meetings is for the transparency piece. This is an operational bit that we want to make a change to, not anything that's going to impact students, and it isn't about spending money. So I'm comfortable in suspending the rules and voting on this tonight, because we do need this in place in order to be able to conduct business. And I think it's very important that the Ministry of Education is made aware through the letter sooner rather than later, because it's not just our board that's going to be impacted. There are 72 boards in this province.
Okay, Trustee Amos, go right ahead.
Thank you. I'm in agreement with Trustee Collard. And my other thought is, if we did really need to post it to the board, we could still do that and make sure that there's a statement that this has been approved. But if there was comments coming, that, you could still submit them. I mean, because we will have to be waiting for the province to get back to us before we can make any change in it.
Okay, there are no more speakers on the speakers list. Vice Chair Harrison, I see you're unmuted right now. Did you have something to say? Nope, okay. So so if you could go to your voting form, all those in favor of suspending the rules this evening to deal with this matter. Okay, that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. So, I just noticed I don't have the motion right in front of me. I'll be right there. Actually, Vice Chair Harrison, can I ask you to read out the motion? That'll just speed things up.
Sure thing.
Thank you.
Be it resolved that the following statement be added as item number 3 in the electronic meetings policy 1000-65. 3. The chair of the board, the vice chair, or a board committee chair or their designate may participate electronically and preside over the meeting when the situation warrants, such as, but not limited to, inclement weather and health-related issues, etc., as per section 5.1, subsection 1 of the Education Act. Be it further resolved that a letter be sent to the Minister of Education requesting a review and update of Ontario Regulation 463/97, electronic meetings and meeting attendance, as it does not take into account extraordinary circumstances that could warrant fully digital meetings, and noting that technology is readily available to allow for productive, open, and publicly transparent electronic meetings.
Thank you. And just a note on that, I know people are probably scratching their head saying we've had electronic meetings from March through to the end of August, but those meetings were under an emergency order that has now expired. So that is why this is suddenly an issue. Okay, are there any, I'm looking to the speakers list. Anybody have any comments? Trustee Amos, go right ahead.
Thank you. I would also ask that that the letter be copied to all school boards so they're aware of the issue as well, and to OPSPA. Thank you.
Does everybody, that's our normal practice, but we can, I think it's important to include that as part of our motion. Can I see some nodding, perhaps? Yes, yes, yes. Okay, everybody's nodding. So yes, and there's Trustee Collard coming on screen. Good. Okay, so friendly amendment there to do that. Trustee Collard, you're on the speakers list. Go right ahead.
Sorry, technology isn't my friend today. We still need a mover and a seconder. We only moved for the suspension of the rules. So if you still require a mover and a seconder, I'd be more than happy to be one or the other.
Oh, sorry, and this whole muting thing. Excellent. So we'll take you as a mover and the seconder. Okay, Trustee Rocha would like to second this motion. So still looking to the speakers list. Seeing no other speakers, so we'll go forward. All those in favor of the motion with its friendly amendment of copying the usual suspects? There we go. That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. We will make those changes to the policy document and write the letter to the minister. Okay, how are we doing for time? 9:14. Well, probably 9:12. I have two different clocks here. Okay. We're up to 5.3 for information for this evening. The first item is 5.3.1 outdoor play, learning and education, report 20092 from Superintendent Salmini. You're right ahead.
Good evening, trustees. So before you, you have a report outlining the supports in our system for outdoor learning, outdoor play, as well as outdoor experiential education. It describes our commitment to the inclusion of outdoor learning spaces and daily learning activities, in particular our efforts in our kindergarten program and area. There's also a description of the outdoor and experiential education experiences at both the elementary and secondary level that have occurred over the last few years. For this year, we'll continue many of the existing learning opportunities, but in addition, we're partnering the school programs department as well as the facility services department in developing and operationalizing an opportunity and process for individual schools to write proposals to us to access funding for projects intended to enhance outdoor learning experiences. The proposals will be reviewed and approved with consideration being given to ensuring that we have schools in all the different areas within our district that receive funding if they've submitted proposals, as well as a balance between elementary and secondary projects being funded. The timing for this work will definitely vary depending on the scope of the projects. We're anticipating that some schools will be asking for some things that we could provide relatively quickly and that could be operationalized quickly, whereas others may be looking at projects with a larger scope, but definitely with the completion of all of the projects within this school year. So I would be pleased to take any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you very much. Trustee Gray, you're up.
Thank you very much through the chair to Superintendent Salmini. You actually answered my question because I was really focused on the next steps. I was really excited to see that schools would have an opportunity to create some proposals that would be specific to their school site and to proceed forward for a request for funding. I guess my question is how much funding is available in any given year? Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair to Trustee Gray. I'm going to call upon Superintendent Ngoy to answer the exact amount that we might have put aside for this year. But to answer the question, we haven't put a ceiling on the amount of funding yet. We want to see the proposals that we get in. So depending on the number of proposals we get, we may be able to fund more projects this year, or we may have some larger projects that we give some funding to, and schools also kick in some funding from their own budgets to support. So it'll depend on what we receive before we can make those decisions in terms of the limit to what we could provide for any individual school.
Do you have a follow-up at all?
Oh, I wasn't sure if we were going to hear from Superintendent Nagoy.
Oh, sorry.
Through you, Chair Grabans, to Trustee Gray. We have a couple of funding pots. There's outdoor education through the GSN, the Grants for Student Needs, as well as we've put aside up to $500,000 from reserves. And there are school budget rollovers as well that the schools will be receiving from the prior year, which they will also be able to use for various priorities, including outdoor education. Thank you.
Okay, Trustee Gray. Now, do you have a follow-up?
No, thank you very much.
Okay, excellent. The next trustee is Trustee Reynolds.
Thank you. Through the chair, thank you for the report. It highlights our commitment to outdoor learning spaces, what it looked like over the years, and certainly future opportunities for school projects. What advice can you provide to those who are watching, listening, whether it's parents or school councils, or even corporate entities who might want to lend a hand or have an idea or provide support to a school or a group of schools or even Halton-wide? What sort of advice can we provide to them in terms of getting aboard this opportunity?
Thank you. Through the chair to Trustee Reynolds. I think our biggest criterion and connection will be that it matches our curriculum expectations and the movement of learning forward. So any suggestions that would come from families or from the public, really we would be looking to encourage them to make sure that they are partnering with the educators at the school to make suggestions that would really enhance moving students outdoors for learning, but also really participating in inquiry and exploring the curriculum expectations as opposed to just moving outside.
Thank you. So would it be the best advice to perhaps talk to the teacher or maybe even approach the principal virtually to start that conversation, or would they go to the school council? Where would be the first stop?
Through the chair to Trustee Reynolds, I would say that approaching the school principal would be the appropriate first stop, because they would probably, if they're putting a proposal together, be putting a school-based team together that would work on this. So they would be the best in terms of coordinating any feedback or suggestions that may come from the public.
Okay, next up is Vice Chair Al Harrison.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. I was just wondering, it sounds like there is a healthy amount of potential funding for various proposals that come in. I'm really hopeful that we will have many, given the importance or the possibilities that being outside can help in a pandemic, but being outside in environmental education has always been a great idea. So I just wonder whether, if it's possible to hear back how that whole proposal process goes, and whether we can, I guess, somehow get creative with all of the proposals that match our criteria to somehow move them forward, whether it be through a phased approach or through leveraging some of the money that's been promised by the federal government in round 2. It just seems to me that any proposal that meets those criteria is a good one and hopefully can be implemented.
Through the chair to Vice Chair L. Harrison, certainly we can come back and share some exciting stories, hopefully, of the things that have come forward and the things that we funded and are going to happen this year, so we can make that commitment. And we're really looking at timing right now. Our environmental sustainability officer is working with the assistant principals in school programs in order to create this process and to launch it. And we are going to put it out there as a great opportunity and really encourage schools to put those proposals forward. So we are hoping that we get a healthy number of them. But as was pointed out, we do have a good, strong budget, and I'm hopeful that we can fund what comes forward. But we'll just need to see what they come up with. And the other part of the process is that they're looking at creating sort of a menu of things that schools could do, but certainly we don't want to stifle the innovation or the creativity that may come from those school teams themselves, but just as a starting point for people to get their thinking going in this area. So definitely we can share back some of the great things that are happening, and we will try to fund all of the proposals if possible, but as many as we possibly can, and we will promote this opportunity at an appropriate time so that schools have the time to do this work.
Excellent. Do you have a follow-up by Chair Harrison?
I do. I think it's brief, or I'll try to be brief, and that is through you, Madam Chair. For schools that don't come forward in round one, I'm going to be hopeful and just say this is round one of many. Is there a mechanism anticipated for diffusing the knowledge, the experience, just so that schools in round two can really benefit from what we learned this time around?
Yep, through the chair to Vice Chair L. Harrison. It is tricky for us right now to do any kind of professional learning or exchange of learning in traditional ways as we've done it, because we're limiting the use of occasional teachers in order to release staff during the day for learning. But having said that, we're being very creative in terms of creating opportunities outside of the school day, virtual opportunities, other ways of sharing information. So it may look a little different than in previous times where we might network schools and people together in a face-to-face way in order to promote learning and sharing, but certainly we'll look for opportunities in this new reality that we're in to have schools be able to share some of the good things that are happening in their spaces. And we've had lots of good examples of that since the closure period in terms of how we do things differently, because we've had to, and it's been successful in terms of growing and sharing and celebrating.
Okay. There are no more speakers on the speakers list right now. So thank you very much for your report, Superintendent Salmini. Really appreciate all the work that's gone into that, and looking forward to outcomes.
Thank you.
We're going to take a 10-minute recess. So if everybody could be back by, well, actually, let's make it a nice even number, 9:35. That would be great. Please make sure you've muted your machines. Thanks. Line 1, Associate Director Bogue, you're up.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Through you to trustees. This is I think this is our third annual Ombudsman Office report. This is an annual report, and this will be the last time that it's going to appear down in the information items. It's going to end up in the consent agenda, I think, where it probably more appropriately belongs. This report really outlines the amount of involvement the Ombudsman's Office has had over the last year, and you'll see in the report that there was 14 concerns raised with respect to the Halton District School Board. We are aware of 2 of them. In both cases, they were phone calls to us, and superintendents shared some information with the Ombudsman's Office, and the matters were considered resolved. So while our goal would be to have 0 complaints or concerns raised, we know in a board our size, there are things sometimes go astray, and we are pretty happy with the numbers, but we will still aim to reduce those moving forward. I'm happy to answer any questions that folks may have. We've not provided the details of the 2 particular complaints in the report because there are privacy issues and those kinds of things, but I'm happy to answer any questions of a general nature.
Thank you very much, Associate Director Bogue. I'm looking to the speakers list, and I see no speakers. So thank you very much, and we will move to our next item.
Did David say he's going to move it to the consent agenda?
Okay, so item 533, Audit Committee Report, Report 20097. And this is by the former chair of the Audit Committee, Trustee Gray, and Superintendent Ngoy. Go right ahead.
Thank you very much through the chair to all of the trustees. Each year at this time, the audit committee members are required to submit an annual report to the Board of Trustees and the Ministry of Education, which provides an overview of the administrative tasks completed and the work of the external auditor and the regional internal audit team during the fiscal year just completed. As you can see from the report that you have before you tonight, in particular, the summary of the work that was performed through this past fiscal year, that very much was accomplished during this past year. That would conclude my report. I think all the information is explanatory in the report, but I'm certainly happy to answer any questions with the support of Superintendent of Business Services, Roxana Ngoy. Thank you.
Thank you. And Trustee Reynolds is on the speakers list. And I would just like to say congratulations to Trustee Reynolds for your election to be chair of the audit committee this year, and Trustee Collard to be the vice chair of the audit committee. So go right ahead, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and thank you for this opportunity to chat. And if there's any other questions, I can jump out, but I didn't want to miss the opportunity to weigh in on Trustee Gray's report. At our meeting, we did hold our elections, and I've been honored to be handed the reins of chairship from Trustee Gray, and I welcome Trustee Collard as vice chair. But I really wanted to share publicly the appreciation the audit committee had for Trustee Gray for her 4 years of chair leadership of the committee, in which we saw many process improvements, meeting procedures, and governance. How we undertake audit meetings now, it's very closely aligned to how we run meetings as Board of Trustees. So I wanted to make sure that I got a chance to offer some public congratulations and thanks. And I just have actually one reminder to the report from our meeting for trustees to note November 11th, committee of the whole. Audit committee members are invited to attend that particular meeting to discuss strategic risk management. We've invited them currently, and we know that you'll welcome them. So that concludes my report, and thank you very much.
Thank you. And I don't see any other speakers on the speakers list. So thank you all, every one of you, for all the work you do on the audit committee and for submitting the report. Okay, we are up to 533, reopening schools update. Director Miller and the senior administrative team. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Chair Gerbentz. I'm going to turn it immediately over to Superintendent Ruddock, as has been our format, which seems like forever. She runs this part of the meeting and then distributes the questions and presents the superintendent. So without further ado, Superintendent Ruddock.
Thank you. Good evening. Stuart, I think
Are you in a forest somewhere or what?
You need to mute.
Right.
Okay. No?
Why don't you go out and come back in?
I would suggest Judy, the next person can go, and I'll go out and come back in.
Who is the next person?
That's Superintendent Penny Father.
Okay, so we'll start there.
Greetings and thanks. And what we're both Associate Director Bogue and I will be talking about is the virtual schools, and through the chair to the trustees. Here we go. Much of what you're going to hear is actually Superintendent Padre did a great job of explaining the complexities of the new virtual schools and what we're working through. And today we just completed day 16 for 13,373 students and 664 teachers in the virtual elementary. And what we're doing right now was actually discussed previously. We're working through class adjustments as part of what's usually called the fall reorg, and balancing out our classes in the virtual elementary schools. We're being supported by different departments, continue to be supported by different departments in the board. IT is continuing to support us as we make sure students and teachers have the appropriate technology and things are working well, because that's really key in what we're trying to do. We're planning for the second possible transition for parents, the November 30th, which was also discussed already. And we have the benefit of learning from our first time around and watching other boards, as some are doing it a few weeks before us. The change form, as said earlier, is open to the public from October 19th to the 27th. There's many processes. When they talked about the complexity, sometimes it's very small, little technical issues. For example, when teachers in the virtual school need to gain access, to example, to an IEP, how that teacher is coded, and how the IEPs are transferred. This virtual process wasn't necessarily built for that. So our special ed team has been supporting us and is finding workarounds to make sure that teachers and special ed teachers can access this type of thing. And these small system tweaks and workarounds are going on all the time, and we're again being supported by IT in that. And we also want to thank our program department for working with our teachers and our principals on curriculum and assessment end of things, because that's the main thing that we do, and it's good to start getting down to that as we sort of settle in. Thank you.
There are no speakers on the speakers list. Just a reminder to trustees that you're welcome to add yourself to the speakers list anytime.
So perhaps I'll just jump in and finish off with secondary. Is that okay, Superintendent Ruddock, before we turn it back to you? Just to follow along Superintendent Pennyfather's comments, many of his comments apply to secondary as well. We had a really, really busy startup in secondary, and I don't want to jinx things, but we're into a bit of a rhythm now, and I think that's been a really positive piece. We're actually coming up in about a week or so to the midterm point of the first quadmester, which is amazing how the time has flown. We are still managing some technology issues on a fairly regular basis. You can imagine with 3,500 kids and that many staff as well, we have issues both with some of our student technology and staff. So we're problem solving those on the fly, and we expect that probably will be with us ongoing. I think trustees are aware that PPM 164 outlines the requirements around distance learning, and one of the pieces in that policy program memorandum is an exemption process from synchronous learning that parents can apply for. And so this is a new piece with this new model this year, and we're working through that. What does that look like if a family wants to be exempt from synchronous learning? How do we keep those kids engaged? How do we assess work? How do we deal with attendance and those kinds of things? So that's a challenge, and that applies in our elementary virtual schools as well. So we're working through that, making some progress. And similarly to the elementary model, we are starting to ramp up to prepare for quadmester 2, whether that be we're expecting that we may see an increase in virtual numbers, but we're waiting to see and looking at contingencies for all outcomes, whether we gain kids, lose kids, and what does that whole staffing process look like, and the whole movement of kids back and forth between virtual and in person. And I think that's about it for secondary. And again, John or I would be happy to answer any questions.
Trustee Shuttleworth, you're up.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I know this was somewhat answered with Superintendent Podberg and Superintendent Blackwell's presentation earlier this evening, but I have had many concerns coming from within the community, both staff and families, that the decisions that they made regarding the reopening of schools were under guidelines that have since been changed. They were made under the original guidelines with the original protocols in place, and now that things have changed, many families are experiencing increased anxiety. So how are we as a board preparing for the influx of change that may come at the end of November? And what will happen to those families and students who are experiencing that increased anxiety with the loosening of protocols around the symptoms and students going to school?
Maybe I could jump in then through you, Madam Chair, to Trustee Shuttleworth. And I think when you're Trustee Shuttleworth, so I'm certain of what you're asking. With those increased anxiety, you're thinking about a significant uptake from in-person to virtual.
I think so. And again, yes.
Yeah.
I'm assuming yes.
So we have seen some of that with families right now, and we have some families that are still attached to their in-person schools, but not attending physically, and they're waiting for this next switch date. So that's sort of in the works, and their homeschool right now is working with them. When the switch date, once the data comes in and we do make those switches on November 16th, I think in secondary, and November 30th in elementary, we will need to do some restaffing, and Superintendent Podberg and Blackwell both did a really nice job of explaining what that process looks like. So if we were to see a net influx of kids to virtual, we obviously would have to build additional classes, courses in secondary to accommodate those kids, and staffing would need to come out of our in-person schools because that pot of staffing is finite, and so there's a readjustment there. And so that's part of the work that we're planning for right now. How do we deal with the student pieces in terms of their movement, and then the corresponding staff pieces, so that we've got classes built and staff prepared to receive those kids in whichever direction that they should move.
There follow-up?
No follow-up. Thank you.
Okay, there's no other speakers at this time, so go right ahead.
Thank you, trustees. Good evening. As you may know, there's been another update to the Ontario school screening tool. So we have been working to make sure that our processes align with the provincial school screening tool. We are noticing that there are different symptoms and processes for our staff and for our students. And this is really based on new and emerging understanding around COVID and how it impacts children differently than adults. The steps for a student once they are exhibiting symptoms really vary depending on what symptom is being presented and how many symptoms are presenting. And it can range from simply going home or staying home and being monitored for 24 hours, or it could require a medical assessment. And it would be through that medical assessment that it would be determined whether a COVID test is required. So that's certainly a shift from our prior practice, further to what Trustee Shuttleworth just mentioned. In addition to that, the Halton region has adjusted its class order, also based on emerging evidence and provincial direction. And this has changed the isolation periods. And so the isolation period, which used to be consistently 14 days, can now be anywhere between 10 days and 20 days, depending on the case details. And then the final piece that we have changed to align with provincial direction is to not require any form of documentation for a student to return to school. So we do believe that our parents are being diligent in keeping their children home when they're ill and following up with the healthcare provider. And so we no longer require a screenshot of a test result or a medical note for a child to return to school. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I'm looking to the speakers list. Oh, Trustee Shuttleworth, go right ahead.
Hi, me again. I'm sorry. This is a question for Superintendent Ruddock. So my question is, if there is a case and the class school is closed and the students all go on the 14-day isolation, is the teacher expected to go back into school?
So through the chair to Trustee Shuttleworth, that is the decision of Halton Region Public Health. As part of their case investigation, they do a risk assessment of the teacher, and they spend a great deal of time asking the teacher questions such as what amount of time were you in close proximity to students? What kind of measures do you have in place to ensure physical distancing? How did you wear your PPE? When did you wear your PPE? And through all of these questions, public health determines whether the teacher is considered a high risk or low risk of exposure. In all of our cases where a student has had COVID in the classroom, our teachers have been deemed low risk. And I think that's a real testament to their efforts to follow all of the measures that we have in place, to wear the PPE that's been provided, and to ensure that they are physically distancing as much as possible throughout the day. So in those cases where the teacher is deemed low risk, it is the expectation that the teacher continues to work. And if that class, the whole class, is in self-isolation, then that teacher would deliver the learning synchronously to those kids throughout the isolation period. If the teacher was in isolation as well, and the class was also in isolation, then it would be the expectation that the teacher, assuming that that teacher hasn't developed symptoms and is unwell, the teacher would work from home and deliver the learning synchronously.
Do you have a follow-up, Trustee Shuttleworth?
I don't think so. No, I don't. I'll leave it for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. There's no other speakers on the speakers list, so go right ahead.
Good evening, trustees. I believe I'm next. So 2 updates regarding special education. The first is the consolidation of some of our self-contained classes. Each spring and fall, we look at our enrollment in self-contained classes and make decisions regarding opening, closing, consolidation, and moving. This fall, we had more classes impacted due to the number of families choosing the virtual school model. Once we confirmed the enrollment in these classes, the decision was made to consolidate certain classes, and those classes are included in a chart in the report that you have. So the big work that comes after that is the transition planning. So that work has been engaged by our school staff, our student services department, and with parent input. And those transition actions have been going on for the past week and a half, and will continue this week with students starting classes on October 13th. Also an update on our Canadian Cognitive Abilities Test that we conduct each October for students in grade 4. The families of students in our in-person schools have been notified of this process as we do each fall. The families of grade 4 students in our virtual schools have been notified that we're considering options for the administration of this assessment, which may include in-person in a large setting such as a gymnasium on a weekend. Also an online US version that currently can't be proctored, and we need to confirm that the norms are acceptable between this US version and our Canadian students. And we're also considering the possible deferral into a later grade. All of those things are being investigated, and we'll get back to families about those. Certainly important is to know the numbers we're talking about, whether we're talking about hundreds of students to do some sort of assessment in the virtual model, or potentially thousands, because we do have 4,500 students in grade 4. So that will be clarified in the coming weeks. And both of these updates were shared and discussed at our SEAC meeting last night. And I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Sonnefeld. We do have a speaker on the speakers list. Trustee Collard, go right ahead.
Thank you. My question is regarding the collapse of the self-contained classes. I have received numerous emails from parents who were very distressed about the collapse of some of these classes, and I realized that some of them were you decided not to collapse them. If you could just provide some more detail on which classes you reversed your decision on and why, for the public, that might be helpful for them to understand.
Sure, thanks for that question, Trustee Collard. So we decided to keep the 2 life skills classes open at Martin Street. And that's because we realized that we made an error with our decision to close those, because they were of a size that we decided to keep open. We were choosing 2 classes at a time for life skills because we've tried to keep 2 classes together. So I know some people questioned why we would do that, but we've established a model from grades 4 to 8 of having students in one school, and so that's why we had the 2 classes we were choosing to close together. So we decided to keep those 2 open because of that size. And the other one that we changed was at Irma Colson. There was a learning disabilities class there that we decided to keep open, and that was due to be honest, a data error that we had. A different number when we originally made the decision to close classes, and then when we consolidate classes, and then when we looked again at our data, that number was different. So we decided it was the right thing to do to make sure that we kept those classes open when we knew that there were enough students in each of them. So that's why we made those changes.
Thank you. May I have a follow-up?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. So in total then, how many classes were collapsed, and what was the process that you undertook to place those students in new classes, and how many students were affected?
So I'm going to refer to the chart that I've included in your report. And so you'll see there, we've included more classes in the chart than we actually closed because we wanted to help SEAC last night and trustees tonight see where there was more than one class in the school where we combined classes. So the actual count, I have to do quickly, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 classes were affected, or were consolidated, I'll say, and a total of 39 students moved classes. In 3 of those cases, they stayed in the same school. So you can see the numbers there if you look at the chart. Whereas in the other 9 schools, they transferred to another school. And then in terms of process, so we started with communication with schools to make sure that the principal was aware of the change, who then communicated that with staff, and the staff together with the school. Yeah, each year we do this. They develop a plan on how and when to communicate with students. I'm sure you can appreciate that varies with the profile of students and how they do that, and also with families. We try to do all that within a day or two because we know as soon as one group knows, it can get out pretty quickly. So we try and do that in that short period of time, and then right away engage families and staff in transition planning. So that looks very different for each student. We try to make sure we address needs, whether they be around information sharing about the new setting. Often we did many virtual visits. I'm sure you can appreciate this time, getting the chance to meet staff and students in the new school, making sure that routines are being established for that transition, making sure that transportation arrangements have been adjusted, transfer of equipment occurs, transition meetings between the staff of the 2 schools to share information about students, talk about IEPs, make sure that they're aware of strategies and resources that need to be used in the new setting. Sometimes things like social stories are developed for students to help them prepare for that change. There'll be a number of other things specific to the students, but those kinds of things are done for me.
Right. So logistically, a lot of things are in motion in order to make these transitions happen. My concern is always going to be around the impact to the student. Have you put in place any kind of monitoring to ensure that the transitions are going smoothly for these students? A lot of these students would have great difficulty with this type of transition, especially if they're being moved from one school to another. And we don't want to cause any undue stress for students and their families. COVID is stressful enough. Adding stress is the last thing we want to be doing. So I'm wondering if you have any kind of monitoring in place to ensure that these students are coping with the transition well.
For sure. We have, to be honest, this is something that our staff do regularly and do quite well. What's different in this case is a time of year and the time frame. We do this fall and spring each year. This is a larger number than we would normally do in the fall. But once again, that's because of the model choice that families made. And the timing of this is fairly quick. Normally this would be a process that we would engage in over a number of months in the spring. And in this case, we're doing it in a number of weeks. So we have basically assigned all of our IPL staff in student services to support these schools, to make sure that these transitions are really well supported. Any support that staff needed in any of those ways that I mentioned, we made sure that we have staff working closely with them to do this. And in terms of that monitoring, there's a lot of communication going on between the sending school and the receiving school. So they're talking constantly about how the student is doing in preparation for the move, and then following up afterwards. We've even done things like where we have a speech language pathologist that's supporting a student in the one school. We've made plans to have that pathologist continue supporting that student in the new school, so that there's a familiar face. I can think of a couple cases where we've had EAs that are being transferred as well to support students. So those kinds of things we try to do to make sure that there's as much support and stress relief, as you've mentioned, as possible. We know that are definitely some challenges for some families in this, but our decision to do this was made based around knowing that these classes, when you have 2, 3, 4 students, we felt too small, especially for the whole year, and in light of the lack of integration that can occur because of COVID. So you would have a class of 3 students who are just on their own for the whole year, can't even join other students on the schoolyard. So we really felt that it's important to have a larger class in order to be able to support all the shared learning, discussions, social emotional development, et cetera, that comes with a larger class group. So we feel that that's going to be much more supported in these larger settings.
Thank you. I do understand that we make these decisions with compassion. It is a very difficult time for some of these families, though, and I do appreciate you taking the time to explain this. Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker on the speakers list is Trustee Gray.
Thank you very much through the chair. I will decline asking a question because Trustee Collard and Superintendent Sonnenfeld have covered exactly what I was wanting to hear about, and that was all about the transition. And then I do know that we do have a strong transition program in place, and it was great to hear some of the aspects of that transition. So thank you very much, Superintendent Sonnenfeld.
Okay, there's no more speakers on the speakers list. Go right ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair, I believe I'm next. And I'd like to report on the...
Actually, I'm going to interrupt you because we are just after 10 and we have to do a motion to extend. I hear from Trustee Shuttleworth here in the boardroom for half an hour. Trustee Rocha will second that motion. Is there any other discussion on time at all, or are we going to go with half an hour? Okay, we're going to go with half an hour then. So all those in favor of extending this meeting 1/2 hour? That carries unanimously with, I do believe Trustee Taylor may have left the meeting.
Yes, he has.
Okay, yeah, so that carries unanimously then. So we have another half an hour to go. So go right ahead.
Thank you. I'd like to report on the current state of the class size in elementary. When I was here on September 2nd, I gave you some preliminary numbers regarding class size and spoke about how we do a September reorganization in regular times and how that reorganization would instead take place after Thanksgiving, so effective next Tuesday. When we began that process, we realized that it would be quite a large reorganization due to the establishment of the virtual schools. So decisions were made to try to minimize the impact as much as possible in traditional schools and concentrate, as Superintendent Pennyfather alluded earlier, to balancing the classes in virtual schools and lowering some of those class sizes. So we've done that in anticipation of having to do a fairly large reorganization at the end of November, at the time when modes may be switched by parents. So rather than do one in mid-October and another one 6 weeks later, we minimized the October reorganization. So the result of that reorg is that class sizes in elementary traditional schools have not changed greatly from what I reported to you on September 2nd. Our kindergarten class size in traditional schools currently 19.8. Our primary class size for grade 1, 2, and 3 is 18.4. And our junior intermediate class size is 22.9. So all of these are in many cases well below compliance numbers in the ministry regulations, and in most cases lower than what I reported to you in September. So I'm happy to take any questions about that.
Okay, so I'm looking to the speakers list. Okay, I don't see any speakers on the speakers list. That was, oh, sorry. Oh, sorry, Trustee Shuttleworth used the wrong form. So she is on the speakers list. Go right ahead, Trustee Shuttleworth.
Okay, thank you. Through you to Superintendent McFadden. So I'm trying to find the notes I had a while ago that you were talking about the class sizes, and you were talking about the fact that we had no classes that were over 27. Just trying to find it, and I can't. In the bricks and mortar. So I'm just wondering, although, so you say that the class average for intermediate is 22.9. What are the higher end class sizes, and how many of them are there?
Thank you for that question, Trustee Shuttleworth. We currently have 17 classes in the bricks and mortar schools that are above 26 students. So that has been significantly lowered from my report of September 2nd. And again, we tried to minimize as much as we could the disruption of the bricks and mortar schools, knowing that we will be doing a reorganization at the end of November. So we are aware that that will be another opportunity to lower those class sizes at that time. But knowing that, or anticipating that there might be a shift from bricks and mortar schools to virtual at that time, we will take another look at it then.
Do you have a follow-up?
So yes, so I found it. So back on a while, I guess it's the 14th, that there was 50 classes over 25, but there were no classes over 27. So is that still the case, that we have no classes over 27?
We have 17 classes over 26, and I believe we have 6 classes at 28.
Okay.
And those are all grade 8.
They're all grade 8.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. And then this is, can I have another quick follow-up?
Yes.
And I don't know if you'll know the answer to this or not, but so with these classes where they are the larger class sizes, are the classrooms bigger? Like, are we trying to make class sizes reflective of the space that we have for the kids to space? Or
I can't answer that question. I do know the schools that the classes are in, but I can't answer the classroom sizes. And I don't think that we can we can try to facilitate that, because class cohorts don't come in that nice organized manner, only large ones in large classrooms. So I can't answer that, but I do know that we will be paying attention to these intermediate classes in November.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, there's no more speakers on the speakers list, so go right ahead.
Good evening, trustees. I think I'm next. I have a quick update just on the personal protective equipment and the deliveries to school. We've been very busy in terms of providing, supplying and delivering the personal protective equipment across our system. We continue to coordinate most of the orders provincially through the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services. And despite the many challenges of a central provincial supply delivery system, our staff have mobilized and have been able to deliver all of the necessary supplies to schools. Currently, we've delivered the October supplies to schools, and we've already placed the order for the next month for November. We do keep track of all the orders that we have to put through separately through our own funding. We have to do that to replenish certain items, or because the supplies that are available centrally are limited or in short demand. And we continue to work with both the Ministry of Education and Ministry of Government and Consumer Services to expand their list and inform them of our needs. And I just wanted to mention that our health and safety team and our procurement team, as well as facilities, have quickly pivoted into becoming a logistics team overnight with over 106 locations to deliver products to in various quantities and various sizes. And they have been working weekends and evenings to make that happen. And we wanted to thank them all, and the school administrators and the caretakers, for also quickly adjusting to managing large inventories and tracking everything. So it's a considerable amount of time, and it's just one more addition to their responsibilities or added responsibilities. Thank you.
Okay, I'm looking to the speakers list. No, there's no one on the speakers list. Go right ahead, Superintendent Ruddock.
No, thank you. I think I was only going to say that that takes us to the end of our update.
Okay, thank you very much. That's wonderful news. So we actually have to go back, take a step back, because we missed that there was actually a recommendation as part of the audit report number 533. So I have to bring that up. Trustee Gray, would you like to move the motion? Yes.
Yes, I would.
And Trustee Reynolds, would you like to second the motion? Okay, I will read this motion. Be it resolved that the Halton District School Board of Trustees accept the 2019-2020 Audit Committee Annual Report to the Board of Trustees and the 2019-2020 Annual Report to the Ministry. Is there any discussion at all? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? And that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay. We are now up to notices of motion. Are there any notices of motion at all? Seeing none. Director's report. Director Miller, do you have a report for us this evening?
Thank you, Chair Gravents. I have a few items, none of them are very long. It's just an update for the Board of Trustees. I'm sure the Board of Trustees have heard from some of your constituents and some parents around the lack of refunds for some travel expenses that were booked for trips, primarily around March break, but there were other trips in around a bit later in the school year and so on, in which we canceled those trips. As a board, we canceled those trips, like all boards in Ontario canceled. And one of the requirements for us as a board is that when these trips are organized, parents and or students are required to take out travel insurance. And so as we had put correspondence that we said to parents that seek the travel insurance first. It is our understanding that this is an eligible expense to be refunded, but we've had some great challenges with the providers and the insurance companies, which I won't name at the moment, but in parents being able to access the refunds. We as a board are supporting them and trying to work through this. Out to parents this week, asking them for some information which will enable us to continue to facilitate this and to advocate in support of getting the funds. I would say that this is not just a Halton problem. It's not just an GTA problem. It is an Ontario problem. It is a Canada problem. This is this situation has occurred for families in Manitoba and the East Coast, as far as we're aware. We know that other boards in Ontario, I won't name them at this point, are having exactly the same issues, and they are essentially involving the same companies that we are dealing with. So with that said, be assured for the Board of Trustees that this is something that has reached our attention, and we are focused on trying to resolve this for our parents and students who did put out money in good faith. But I would also say that we've enlisted these companies in good faith, and they have been successful providers of trips in the past. And there was no reason for us to suspect that anything would be a challenge this time in doing so. In the past, we have canceled trips for other reasons, and the refund was forthcoming. And in this case, other providers, we have canceled the trips this time around, and the refunds were forthcoming. So it's unique to this situation. I know that may not be consolation for some families and parents, but we are working on it, and more information will come out to parents. I'm hoping in the very near future, but for the time being, a letter will be going home, and that letter will be asking for some information which will help us in our process in supporting the parents. So unless there's any questions, I'll move on to the next item.
There is a speaker on the speakers list, Vice Chair Al Harrison.
Sure.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. So this is a big issue for a number of families. As you have pointed out, they're out of pocket, sometimes upwards of $2,500, I've heard, and combined with other things that are going on, it's not the best time to be out of pocket at all. So it's really, and I understand these families are hearing directly from some of those companies, and that the letters are alarming, I guess. So I just wondered if you could please clarify, just so I write it down properly and convey it, when people will be expecting a letter from HDSB.
Well, they have had several letters now, but they're expecting a letter. They should be getting a letter tomorrow or Friday,
okay.
Informing them of kind of the next steps that we are pursuing. And
Cool.
that's the gathering of the information. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, there's no one on the speakers list, so go right ahead with your next item.
Well, the next ones are all good news. And the first one I would turn to Superintendent Ruddock.
Thank you. Through the Chair to Trustees, I'm very pleased to share with you that a teacher at River Oaks Public School, Richard Bernard, has been awarded the Prime Minister's Award for Teaching Excellence. He is a very innovative and creative educator. He connects students to nature and photography and community service. He brings the curriculum to life in his classroom, and I think he's probably most known for the stop animation projects that he does with his kids every year. So we're very proud of Richard, and he has certainly made the board proud. So congratulations to you, Richard. Thank you.
I see Trustee Amos, were you going to say something, Trustee Amos?
I have met this gentleman, and he is an inspiration, and I know that the community must just be so proud of him, and the students I know all want to be in his class or in his extracurriculars, and so I think it's just an example of one of the fine teachers that we have in our board. But I mean, congratulations to him, because it's very well deserved.
Thank you, Trustee Amos. And I would say the only thing I would add that's slightly different is speak to the character of Richard. I sent him a congratulatory note. His response was, great staff and kids here. So this is the kind of way he thinks, right? He's sharing it with others. Next, I will turn it over to Superintendent Blackwell.
Yes, and it's my pleasure to a similar award, the Prime Minister's Award for Teaching, to Stacey Felkner. She's a teacher at Lakeshore Public School. She teaches a self-contained program for students with learning disabilities, and really it's about students with learning abilities, because she does such an amazing job of promoting those students, sharing their learning journeys. She's had exhibition nights at the Lakeshore Public School with other grades. They've been presenting at conferences across Ontario. If you get a chance to check them out on Twitter, they are the numeral 8 tech dudes. And she's a phenomenal promoter of students and building students' confidence in their own learning abilities. And kids are when they come into that program and leave, they are different people. She is a phenomenal person. She's also, in 2018, received the Ontario Council for Exceptional Children Teacher of the Year Award. So she is very well known across this province, and we are so fortunate to have her in Halton. She's phenomenal.
Thanks, Terry. Trustee Reynolds, I believe that's one of schools. I don't know if you have anything to say. You don't have to. If you don't worry.
Yeah, congratulations, Stacey. I had the opportunity to visit one of her classes last year, and I was blown away by what I saw and experienced. I didn't believe that schools could be so different from what I remember. From having I remember she had it felt like going into a completely different place, and I'm so delighted actually to hear this, and so good for her, and so great that we can have some good news stories to praise, because man, there's a lot of stories that I think we need to hear about that we don't get to hear enough about. So well done.
Director Miller, I forgot one point. Stacey had her students present to our information services staff on the technologies that they're using every day in the classroom, and actually provided PD for our staff. So she finds opportunities for kids, and she is an outstanding educator for sure.
That's right. Yeah. And I have not congratulated Stacey myself, but I will tomorrow. The last announcement I was going to make myself, but I've just had a change of heart, because I know that this department is very near and dear, and the board is very near and dear to Executive Officer McFadden. But as you know, Executive Officer McFadden is retiring at the end of October, and we have just been through a process in which we have hired her replacement, and I haven't given her a heads up, so I hope she's ready, because I'm going to ask her to speak about and announce who that person is. So, Executive Officer McFadden, sorry for the lack of heads up if you're not. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm actually quite honored to be given the opportunity to introduce my replacement. The former General Manager of Human Resources, Sari Taha, is the successful candidate for the position, and I am delighted to be able to announce this to the public and to celebrate his achievements. He has been a long-serving Halton employee. He is extremely well prepared and educated for this position. He has devoted himself to education, is a lifelong learner, has his bachelor's of finance in public administration, has a master's of arts in public policy, has his supervisory officer's papers, and has grown to be a human resources master practitioner. And I'm delighted to leave my department, our department, in such conscientious hands. And I retire knowing that someone who really cares about the people in the department, but moreover, all of the staff and students of the Halton District School Board are in wonderful, compassionate, and professional hands. So it's my delight to welcome him and congratulate him on this appointment. Thank you.
Thank you, Executive Officer McFadden. And with the, I will turn it over to Superintendent Taha to have the last word of Director's report, and then I'm done, Chair Drabens.
Thank you, Director Miller. Thank you, Executive Officer McFadden. Through you, Madam Chair, to the rest of the trustees and senior admin, I'm truly humbled and honored by this appointment. I want to extend my gratitude to all of you for this great honor and the trust that you've placed in me. I truly am looking forward to working and working with this board and serving this board, working with our senior admin, a very talented group, working with our school and corporate leaders, our union partners, and all of our stakeholders, and to continue to make a difference for our staff and our students. I also want to just, on a personal note, acknowledge Executive Officer McFadden. I mean, words can't adequately describe what I think of you and your impact on me as a person, as a professional. You know, I'm grateful for your mentorship and guidance that you've given me in the last few years. You are truly a great role model, a great leader, and a friend. Thank you very much. Thank you. It's an honor to take over from you, and I wish you all the best in your retirement. Thank you.
Such wonderful news and such an incredible, bittersweet transition we're seeing here. We're really going to miss Executive Officer. We're really going to miss you, Deborah. And we, of course, welcome Superintendent Taha into the position of Superintendent of Human Resources within the next month. It's going to be a big change, but we know, sorry, that you were up for the job and you are going to do us proud. And Deborah, you have done us proud. Thank you so much for all you've done.
Thank you.
Okay, so I understand from Director Miller beside me that his report is finished. So we are up to communication from the chair. And the first thing I'm going to start off with is the multi-year plan, and I'm going to turn it over to Vice Chair Al Harrison to talk about something.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Just briefly, the multi-year plan process was put on pause back in April, and now we're up and running again, almost full steam, I would say. And so what we wanted to do as a group was to reach out to members of the community, administrators in the system, to make sure that the draft multi-year plan as it stands is on the right track. So to take the pulse. So on Thursday and Friday, trustees are hosting 1-hour coffee conversations with members of PIC, councils, SEAC, some others in the parent and community. I'm happy to report we have a lot of people that have signed up, over 50-ish people in and about that neighborhood. So we look forward to having a conversation and reporting back to everyone on what we're finding or what we're hearing. Then the next step will be to bring together the group of superintendents and trustees to take a look at what we've heard and put the finishing touches on that document so that we can consider it for approval either at the end of October and or early November. So then staff can build an operational plan on top of it to make it happen. So on that note, Associate Director Bogue and I were wondering whether, and we'll send out an email, so this is just planting the seed, whether the group would, we're going to try and find a time maybe before Committee of the Whole to have again a 1-hour conversation just again for finishing touches. So that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that update, and I look forward to the coffee conversations happening in the next 2 days. I believe almost all the trustees, if not all the trustees, are involved. Okay, so next is just a mention of items. We did send out a letter to the Minister, Premier, the Minister of Education, Minister of Health, Premier, and the Regional Chair and the Local Medical Officer of Health. There was some learning that came back from that from the local chair, and there is a follow-up letter with that information in it. We did receive a short response from the Premier, and we did receive a letter of support in our request for removing barriers to COVID testing from MPP Arnott up in Halton Hills. And I've actually had a conversation with a local MP about it. So there has been some talk happening, and hopefully things will move faster. Watching the news every day, of course, that's all out of our hands. And then we've also received a letter, a copy of the letter to the Minister regarding pandemic funding. I've also had, as you know, I'm part of a conversation weekly with the Minister. I'm one of 72 chairs sitting on a teleconference call, and I've also had another opportunity to speak with the Minister last Friday as part of a Halton conversation. Halton chairs, Halton directors, including the French boards and the Catholic board and Dr. McGanny. And at both 2 weeks ago, I spoke to the Minister at the teleconference, and I spoke last Friday about wondering what the purpose of the central publishing of public schools and private childcare, but not private schools, COVID cases on the Ontario site, because it leaves an impression that private schools are not affected by COVID, which is false. We know one private school in Oakville has had 4 cases, but we don't know if there are any others. And so I'm wondering what the purpose is, because frankly, it feels like naming and shaming public schools. So I would like the Minister to reconsider that practice and include the private schools. And we're on to committee reports. Vice Chair Al Harrison has submitted a Director's Performance Review Committee report. Vice Chair, would you like to speak to that at all?
Just briefly, Madam Chair, and it ties into the upcoming Committee of the Whole report, where we will present the work that the subcommittee undertook to rewrite, hopefully enhance and improve the DPR policy and procedure. And I should have given notice under notices of motion. There are two motions, or a motion associated with that we'll be bringing back to the next meeting if all goes well.
That sounds great. Okay, are there any other committee reports? Looking to the speakers list, I see Trustee Oliver is on the list.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Chair. SEAC met last night. It was a very informative and interesting meeting with lots of great discussion. I plan to submit a written report for the next board meeting, but I just wanted to quickly tell you that we had three very interesting presentations. The first was on the Project Search, which is a joint project of the Halton District School Board Community Pathways Program with Oakville Trafalgar Memorial Hospital. The second presentation was about summer mental health supports, and that was a Ministry of Education funded project. And the third presentation was on summer learning, again, another Ministry of Education funded project for students with special needs. Thank you.
Director Miller, you have something to add?
Yeah, just thank you for that, Trustee Oliver. If trustees recall, we were going to bring Project Search to the Board of Trustees for a presentation as well in the spring. And then, of course, the system was shut down. And we were kind of hoping that we could do it in person. But obviously, I think it's going to be a long time before we're able to do that. So I will talk to Superintendent Zonnefeld to let's go back, because I think it's a project that, I mean, I know the trustees are involved and interested in so many things, but this is a tremendously successful program. So I will talk to Superintendent Zonnefeld and Trustee Oliver about bringing them, and maybe we'll just do it virtually. It wasn't the preferred choice, but it would appear as though we have no choice. So.
Okay, thank you very much. I hate to do this to everybody, but we need to have another motion to extend. Can I suggest to 11 o'clock? Yes, yes, and okay, Trustee Garretts, will you make the motion?
Yes, I'll make a motion.
Excellent.
Extend it till
11. Okay, and Trustee Oliver, will you second that motion? Yes, nodding, wonderful. Okay, we're gonna go. Is there any discussion at all?
No, we never have.
Nobody's added themselves to the speakers list, so please vote on extending to 11 o'clock.
No, you probably just remember I talked about it.
Okay, so we have, and that carries unanimously. We are going to extend the meeting to 11. Okay, so next up is trustee questions and comments. Could you please add yourself to the speakers list if you have any questions or comments? I keep typing on the wrong computer here. Okay, seeing none. Okay, so we need to have a motion to go back into private session. Trustee Rocha, thank you. Seconded by Trustee Shuttleworth. They're right here. Is there any discussion? Oh, wait, hold on a second. Vice Chair Al Harrison has her hand up. Go right ahead. It must have been slow coming in.
Just like me, no worries. Thanks so much. And through you, Madam Chair, given the motion that was passed earlier this evening about digital meetings, I'm just wondering whether it's the will of the group to host the Committee of the Whole meeting next week in an entirely digital manner. Does that meet with people's approval and Director Miller as well?
Yeah, it's fine by me.
Okay, excellent. Thanks so much. I think everybody nodded, or yeah, thank you.
Okay, that sounds good. Okay, so we have a motion made to rise into private, and seconded. Is it you two? Yes. Trustee Rocha made the motion. Trustee Shuttleworth seconded it. There seems to be no discussion on it, so all those in favor.
In favor.
Excellent. That carries unanimously. Thank you very much. We are now in private session. So Kevin, could you